You weren't, because I had myself muted and I had you muted. So everything that was said in that incredibly embarrassing moment just before we went live, mate,
That was awesome.
I don't think it's going to be recorded either on YouTube Live or on One TV. But welcome everyone to another exciting edition of the Magic Sandwich Show, number 117, if such figures are to be believed, where it is a huge pleasure to welcome two of the regulars, Hogtie Champ and Ozzy. And also to welcome back for the first time in far, far too long, Aaron Ra, and also someone who I think is a Magic Sandwich Show virgin.
Yes.
Welcome to Christine Peace. And for
Hey.
those that may not be familiar with you, Christine, perhaps you'd like to give a few words of introduction about who you are, where you're from, and what your internet life is like.
Well, it's not that exciting. I'm Canadian, and I used to run a YouTube channel all the time. I took about 9 months off, but I'm back into it, making videos regular now, called Christine Peace. And I enjoy debating on Google Plus with creationists. So here I am.
And we will include, if
Go
I
ahead.
remember to do it,
Yep.
I say we will include a link to your YouTube channel in the description of this video, if I remember to do it.
If you remember.
If I forget, do remind me to do so.
It's okay.
But Christian and I have got a bit of a history that I want to talk about. No. As soon as you say that, everyone has the wrong idea.
I know.
I had the huge pleasure of meeting Christine. I think for the first time, was it in Austin?
Yeah, I think it was
For
Austin.
the American Atheist Convention a couple of years ago,
Yep.
and we had an enormous amount of fun there. But more recently, in Texas,
Again.
where yet again we had an enormous amount of fun, and were put up by a wonderful host, Aaron Ra, who I think we have to say treated us with extraordinary hospitality and gave us an absolutely wonderful time. What
My scars are almost healed, actually. So, no, good times, really good times, awesome times, actually.
I asked this question once before and it was taken in the wrong way, and again I don't want it to be taken in the wrong way. What stood out for you during your time in Texas?
You want me to be honest? The fact that my host stepped up at the last minute and saved me from being homeless for about 5 days without even questioning. It was just, yes, you will stay with me. I thought that was amazing. And the fact that you guys enjoyed Americana, and so did I. You guys a little bit more than me. Can I talk about that part?
Yeah, of course, please do.
Oh, the strip joint by far was...
that bit.
Yeah.
You should have been more specific.
Yeah.
I think you guys had a great time introducing DPR to Americanisms and Texas.
For the sake of the audience, and now, of course, every single theist is going to find new material to criticise the...
I said anything?
Hang on, someone's trying to call me. I don't know who's trying to call me. Let me just have a look.
You're calling me.
Yeah, strangely, we're all getting the call. It says it's you calling.
I think you're calling us. Or maybe it's Concordance calling all of us. I think Concordance
been hacked.
I think it might well be Concordance. I'm just trying to find.
I think meeting Concordance was actually really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to have Concordance.
Annie paid for dinner, so.
Now,
that was outstanding.
This is going to temporarily mess up the screen capture, but I will add him and then sort of like rejig that. So that will take a few moments. People will still be able to hear what you're saying. So if you want to carry on talking, please do. But I'm going to try and multitask, and that means I'm probably going to be quiet for a few moments. Add to call. Okay.
Well, I just want to finish saying what I enjoyed the most. This is going to make me sound like a fan or something, but just hanging out with people that I met online through the atheist community in person, including Aaron and DPR again, who I've met at a couple atheist conventions and have always had fun with. And this time it was just an extended fun period instead of just a weekend, so it was great fun.
Well, it's too bad you didn't come with us.
Just bear with me. It's going to take me just 2 seconds just to make sure concordance is here. There we go.
I'm here.
I should have told you at the beginning that Concordance was going to be joining us, but I wasn't entirely sure when he was going to get here. So there we go. I've rejigged everything. Hopefully everyone can now see and also hear everyone. So yeah, I have to say, like Christine was saying, I had an absolutely amazing time in America, and it was not that many years ago that I just didn't really have America down as somewhere where I want to visit. I was thinking I'd much rather go to Africa or the Far East or somewhere like that. But having had the pleasure of going over, I think since 2011. I think the Reason Rally was the first. Was that 2011?
That would be 2012.
12. Well, I've certainly been every year since. I thought I'd been 4 times, so I can't figure out where I've lost a visit or added one. But despite all the crazy, strange stories you hear about America and American people, every single time that I've been there, I've been met with the most wonderful hospitality, generosity, and kindness, and
Yep.
I've had a really, really great time. So if you're not from America and you've got any doubts about going over there, you shouldn't have. And there are so many wonderful things. Whether it's a city like Austin, which I think is just one of the most cosmopolitan and wonderful, exciting, interesting places, or whether you're travelling around as Aaron took me around the deserts of the southern west. There are just so many wonderful aspects to America. So don't believe all the bad stories. That's all I can say. But Concordance, are you with us, Concordance?
I am. Yes.
There we go. I think you may just missed out of hearing Christine Peace's comments about how much she enjoyed meeting you.
Yeah, it was fun.
It was.
It was indeed.
And thank you again for picking up the tab on that.
Yeah,
It's
he was
nice to have a
very
high pick
generous.
You're welcome.
He had Mr. and Mrs. Raw, one of your sons, me and DPR, and it was without question, it's on me, guys. And we had no idea, so we'd been purchasing like whatever we wanted, but it was very nice. It was very kind.
Now, see, you guys are going to be in Texas all the time now. I won't be able to afford it.
I'm not sure I'd go that far, but hey. So, Aaron, do you want to fill people in with what you've been up to? I'm sure that people probably know from your YouTube channel and your Facebook channel, but you've not been with us for a couple of shows now. Apart from entertaining us, what else have you been up to?
We just did a video on the Texas textbooks for history, complaining about how Moses is represented as an actual person.
Oh my.
And getting some very good responses on that. We're really hoping to achieve some kind of legal situation where we can actually contest Texas on that. But obviously, I can't go into details about that. It was something we've been working on for a whole year since they approved these textbooks, knowing full well that they were fraudulent. I mean, it was announced in all the newspapers that they'd accepted, defrauded or debunked or refuted history books. They just went ahead and did it anyway. And we've talked to a number of people in legal counsel about this, and we always hear that it would be a labor-intensive case, and I can't understand why that would be. It looks pretty obvious to me, but we may still have a foothold on how we can approach that.
That's just one example of the sorts of misinformation that I think they're trying to introduce. I think.
There's a lot.
You've mentioned others, including
Yeah.
rewriting the history of the founding fathers or something. Is
Well,
that
that's
included.
Yes, that's also included where they talk about how the founding fathers, rather than being inspired primarily by John Locke and other people from Greece and so forth, they wanted to include some kind of influence that never existed from the likes of John Calvin. Yeah, so that suddenly the founding fathers, the largely deist and Unitarian and Methodist founding fathers, are suddenly Calvinists. in the
Wow.
new revised doublethink or Orwellian version of history.
That's
I
something
I have a question.
that's something I'd like to come back to if I may. But I don't know whether it's just me that enjoys it. I hope you do as well, and I hope the audience does. But for the last few shows, we've started off with a quiz, and this is why I hope that you all have Vaughan TV open to you, or indeed if you're watching it on YouTube Live, just make sure you've got it muted. I've been somewhat lazy this week due to time constraints. So what I'm taking this from, it's 7 questions about news items in the last week from the BBC website, which hopefully, if I click this button, you will now be able to see if you're watching on either Vaughan or not. If is there anyone not watching?
I'm not watching on Vaughan, no.
Okay.
No,
well,
I'm not.
I'll read them. I'll read the questions out for you. But this is something for audience participation as well. It's the quiz of the week, posted on the 30th of October, as I say, from the BBC website, and 7 questions, which those of you that are watching Vaughan and hopefully YouTube Live will be able to see. So, question 1 reads as follows. For reasons which are not entirely clear, there's been a spate of Star Wars-related news stories in the Ukrainian city of Odessa. Which of these is not a genuine headline from the past 7 days? Is it A, Darth Vader statue replaces Lenin monument? B, Emperor, and I'll probably pronounce this wrong, Palpatine
That's
takes
correct.
That's right.
Palpatine takes city council seat in Odessa, or C, Yoda arrested after campaigning for Jedi Party.
Which of these 3 is not an actual headline from
Yes.
Odessa?
Yes.
Can you move the screen down just a bit? I don't think people can see option 3.
And we're just gonna write down
There we
the
go.
answers on a piece of paper for now, since we're
No,
not.
well, I trust you all as being because you're atheists. You obviously have incredible integrity and honesty, and you wouldn't lie. So
No, without a fault,
I'm
yeah.
I'm prepared to accept that each of you, because I'm not going to keep a score of each 5 of you, because we'll be here for the whole 2 hours of the show. So I'm prepared to accept you being honest about your answers.
Okay.
So, but before we do, just go through it. Hogtie, you obviously can see Vaughan.
Yeah.
Which one would you go for?
I think Palpatine is probably the most obscure. So yeah, I'll say Emperor Palpatine takes
Ozzy?
city council. Yeah.
The same. I think
Okay.
Palpatine.
Concordance?
I'm going to argue that the 3rd one is wrong because it was Chewbacca who was arrested after campaigning for the Jedi Party.
Okay.
I remember that event happening.
Okay, Christine?
Well, now it's gonna look like I'm copying the answers. But
You're on the honor system. Doesn't matter what it looks like. It's the honor system.
Well, I'm a Canadian, so I have to tell you honestly. I wrote down B, but now that I hear C, I'm like, that makes sense. But I did write down B.
Okay, and Aaron?
Likewise, I went with option A.
Okay,
Oh.
okay. Now,
Although I heard-
I
saw
think,
that.
and what are the audience saying?
A lot of B's and 2. Somebody put down a 2.
Yeah.
No,
There's
it's
no
the
doubt
same
too.
A.
That's
think-
hilarious.
I
like
think
that
that if
person.
you're in a position like Concordance, you shouldn't say, "Well, I actually know this because I heard it," unless you're bluffing.
I thought that was allowed.
Shall we go for
I'm too honest to
Yoda arrested? And there we go. Concordance has got it right.
Oh.
Yes.
I think that's a bit of a cheating concordance. Well,
So
well,
just,
it's not
just let me
cheating.
help
was
you.
Chewbacca.
No, it's not cheating. You've been kept up to news, but I would advise you not to say, "Oh, I know this one." All right. So
Well, I
that's
will.
definitely-
Have to keep
this
guessing.
really
and
sucks.
the audience can keep count as well, but that's definitely one to concordance. Okay, next question. And just
wait.
I gotta throw in there.
What?
I watch
How did Emperor
all the
Palpatine take a
time.
council seat? How
I
did
presume-
Emperor
Someone
Palpatine
changed
take
the
a
name.
seat?
I presume
right
you
name.
can call
Yeah,
yourself
that's-
by whatever name, so you stand as whatever name
The right
you want. and get
It's like
elected.
D's Nuts in the U.S. Was one of the leading candidates for a while. I'm not kidding.
I'd just like to say I always watch the BBC, and of course this week I did not.
So you're
And
saying that Darth Vader's statue replaced Lenin?
I totally
I
believe
didn't
that when I
know.
heard
I
that.
didn't
I can
say
only-
that.
Aaron-
I didn't say that, Aaron. The question
All right.
was, which of these is not a genuine headline? I can't
Aaron,
go into all the stories. I don't have time to do this. But basically, I can see that you're gutted. You're really pissed off, and I can't help you. But just as whilst we're talking about Star Wars, because I think that's the sort of thing that you enjoy. Would it be an extraordinary confession for me to say that I have never watched one Star Wars movie?
Yes, you should
Good
really
for
keep
you.
that to yourself.
Okay.
People will show up at your house. You really should keep that to yourself. The Jedi people will show up at your door with literature.
Wouldn't that be
I haven't-
great?
And whilst I was
Going door to door in those big brown robes.
Yeah. Have you heard the truth of midichlorians?
We'll have to wait and see. But I remember.
Do you sometimes feel there's a change in the Force and you don't know how to explain it? We've got the answers.
Do you sometimes anticipate things that are going to happen?
Is there anyone else here who has not seen one? And this is in the audience as well. Is there anyone else that has not seen any Star Wars movie?
No, you're a complete freak.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there,
No, I've seen
is
all
there
multiple
anyone-
times, even
is
the
there
crappy
anyone here
ones.
that hasn't seen all of the Star Wars movies?
Oh, I've only seen 2 of them, and I only liked the first one because I was 14.
Well, Quantum Overlord is saying avoid number 1 and 2, so maybe you didn't stick it as far as you should have.
No,
Sorry,
the first one that Ozzy is talking about is not number 1; it's number 4.
Exactly.
4.
Right.
Oh well, shows how
So
much I know
Ozzy-
about it.
Yeah, and then
You should definitely
number
watch the.
5. Number 5 kind of sucked, so I can see kind of why maybe he dropped off of that one.
What? Number 5.
Yeah, 6
Empire
6 was a
sucked.
little better, except for the end. Man, that was
Ewoks?
annoying at the end.
You're taking
Yes,
It's the story of redemption. It was a story of
hated
redemption.
the Ewoks. I
the
hated the
Ewoks.
Ewoks on multiple levels.
Yeah.
We are not.
The
okay.
last
can I,
3
can
to
I,
come
can
out
I, can I
sucked.
refer to it? Sorry, Christine, do go on.
I'm just going to say the last 3 that came out in theaters, I will admit that I disliked them immensely.
How many have there been?
6.
Wow.
So far. The 7th one
Yep.
is just coming out now.
Yeah,
Which
I've
I
seen
will
the
see it
publicity
too.
for the 7th one.
I-
But this reminds me, like, Aaron, I can't remember this. I think that this was when you were in London earlier this year, and we were wandering around the Natural History Museum, and you made mention to Jurassic Park, and I said, "Oh, I think I've seen half of it," and you said, "What do you mean half of it?" And I said, "Well, there's only one, isn't there?" So I don't know. These kinds of films don't seem to grab me. How many Jurassic Park films have there been?
4.
Who's watched all 4?
I've watched all 4.
Oh wow! You need
I've watched
you
3.
need to get a life.
Can't
I
do it.
do.
All right.
I
Anyway,
like
look.
watching these movies.
Let's move on to our next question. Oh, and I've got to
Okay.
make sure. Let me just make sure. Oh no, the answers don't show up until you click them. Now, you may say that this is a BBC channel and the stories are kind of a little bit based on England and Britain. This is perhaps one of only 2 that is. The second one probably is, but this is a little bit more boring. So we'll get through this one incredibly quickly. There was a row this week in Parliament about the House of Lords voting down government plans to cut tax credits. Chancellor George Osborne accused the Lords of breaking a historical agreement not to interfere with an elected government's tax plans. Which 20th century Chancellor and future Prime Minister established this agreement? A. Winston Churchill, 2. James Callaghan, 3. David Lloyd George. It's a really boring question, so just...
Well, I think it's older than Churchill. I think it's got to be one of the other 2, but I don't recognize them.
Right. Well, you're correct, I'll tell you that, and only one of them is older than Churchill. So you're doing very well. So which one is it?
What were the two options again?
If I told you that this was actually put into statute in 1911, would that help? I'm giving you big clues here.
No, I know
it
it
gives
had
it
to
away.
be before Churchill. What were their names again that were not Churchill? You said them?
James Callaghan and David Lloyd George.
Okay. And number C was David Lloyd George, wasn't it?
He was around in about 1911.
That's what I'm picking then.
There we go.
No, I know this one. I learned it in school. It's David Lord George.
Yep, absolutely right. Do you want to disagree, Ozzy?
No, I'm not inclined to disagree.
Yeah, I'd say it's a really boring question. Because
I'm going to
was
vote
bluffing.
for D, which is Emperor Palpatine.
right,
So that was
let's
B?
see. Let's see if we click on David Lloyd George. Oh, there we go. We're right. As I say, not the most interesting question. Okay,
I was bluffing.
This
You
one,
said that was allowed.
yeah, but it was a boring question for everyone. Come on, this
I
one
know,
is
I
much.
got it
This
right.
one is much more
That's right, I'll
interesting.
say-
A rock.
Bluff on the next
Rock,
one.
I
Too.
got it
This
right.
one is much more interesting, okay? The Australian accent came about because of a particular habit of colonial settlers, according to a speech expert this week. What was it? Was it chewing tobacco, drinking heavily, or shouting through prison bars?
And just to be clear, D is not all of the above, because
Oh man, that'd be a good answer for this one. No offense to the Australians, but I know about how they started, right? So does everyone else. Oh, I'm gonna go.
Well, let's do it in
okay,
reverse order. Aaron, you've
I
got
got
a
it.
choice. You've got a choice between chewing tobacco, drinking heavily, or shouting through prison bars. Where did the Australian accent come from?
Shouting through prison bars.
Hogtie,
Chewing tobacco.
Aussie.
If this was a speech expert, I'm going to go with chewing tobacco.
Concordance.
yeah, I want to say the third one because they do sound like they're yelling all the time. But I'm
Yeah.
gonna go chewing tobacco.
And
Hey,
Christine?
there's no fucking carbon in it.
Well, people chew tobacco everywhere, including England, so you'd think their accents would have changed as well. So I'm gonna go with C.
Shouting through prison bars.
I know that's kind of derogatory, but just because how they were a colony once made up of prisoners, that's why I'm going with C.
It's tempting,
Okay,
yeah,
well,
super tempting.
I
And before he
noticed-
reveals the answer, as soon as Hogtie said it, I'm like, no, Hogtie's right.
Oh.
I'm looking at the chat in Vaughan, and I have to say that none of you have got it right. None of the audience have got it right. If we click on drinking heavily, we find that that is the correct answer.
Oh wow.
Dean Freckle
But
from
everybody
Melbourne
thinks that
Victoria's
everybody-
University in Melbourne said that the Aussie originated from a cocktail of English, Irish, Aboriginal and German, but it was spiked by alcohol. He continued, our forefathers regularly got drunk together and through their frequent interactions unknowingly added an alcoholic slur to our national speech patterns.
Boy,
Bollocks.
get another tinny.
So no points to anyone, including anyone. Oh, somebody is.
No, someone did get it.
Somebody
Bert
say-
Poole got it
somebody
right.
did say it was in. Yeah, okay. I apologise. Staying in Australia. This is the next question. Staying in Australia, members of the public have been donating what material to a Melbourne gallery after an appeal to help the Chinese artist Ai Weiwei.
Oh, I know this
create.
one.
Oh, shh! Don't
Okay.
say
You're
that
not
you
supposed
know
to
it.
say when you know it.
Okay.
Create
Sorry.
I'm going to have to come to you last now, Christine.
Okay.
Create an
Sorry.
installation there. The answers are
bluffing.
A. Lego, B. Polystyrene chips, or C. Grass cuttings. So, Christine's going last. Let's
Okay.
go with concordance first this time.
Move the screen down a little bit.
Sorry?
Move the screen down. We can't see the answers.
Oh, I'm terribly sorry. Yeah, sure.
Because I couldn't understand what you're saying. Yeah, I'm going to go with polystyrene chips.
Okay. Aussie.
Yeah, I agree with polystyrene chips.
Hog
It's going to be Lego. Lego.
Lego. Aaron.
That's too obvious.
Lego.
It's too common.
Christine.
I have a reason.
It is Lego.
It is
Aw,
Lego.
man.
There's no creativity there. Everyone's done that.
The reason being,
No,
if I
that
scroll down a little
Lego
bit,
said they wouldn't give him any Lego for his installation.
absolutely. Members of the public are helping out after I was refused bricks by the Lego company, which said that it did not supply bricks for works making political statements. It is a company of an act of censorship and discrimination. So, I hope everyone's keeping count. Oh, a lot of the audience got Lego, but there we go.
I'll tell you why I thought that was an obvious answer. Because if you needed a whole bunch of polystyrene or a whole bunch of lawn clippings, that stuff's available, right? You can go and ask for it. Lego, if you ask Lego, the company, that, well, I want a truckload full of Lego, they're going to ask why. And they might charge you money or they might give it to you for free. But everything else...
I work with like plasma etched polystyrene, which is a couple $100 a piece. And under a microscope, they are works of art. Polystyrene is such a useful polymer. And when it said chips, I thought, polystyrene chips? Because I do work with polystyrene chips, so it would make some really cool art. But, anyway.
Cool.
There's your idea.
You know, that's one of the few lists that I don't think anyone really wants to be on.
They don't care. Actually, they won't care. Yeah, but they won't care because they're dead, I'm saying. Just being a hardcore atheist there.
If you're refusing to answer the question, you're not going to get a point, are you? So you might as well take a guess, even if you don't care.
No,
We'll go
I
for
do
you first
care.
Okay.
No, Christine is not saying that she doesn't care. She's saying that Whitney Houston doesn't care.
Oh, I agree.
'Cause she's dead. I'm being a hardcore atheist.
The question is not whether they care or not. The question is who made the most money.
Who makes the
Me?
most money currently?
I'm guessing.
Who made?
Right.
No, what?
Whose estate made the most money?
I'm guessing Whitney.
Whitney.
Yeah, it's Whitney.
Whitney.
Oprah Winfrey.
Oprah Winfrey's not on the
Alive.
list.
That's wishful thinking.
Yeah, she's
Ouch! Wow.
she's dead to me.
Okay. Yeah.
It was wishful thinking on my part.
After what
Yeah.
you said about atheism,
Oprah's dead to me.
Yeah, she's dead
When that
to me
happens,
too
I'll
after that.
experience awe and wonder.
It's Whitney Houston.
Everyone's going
Whitney.
for Whitney.
No,
Yeah,
I'm going to go
one
for
person
Marilyn
who-
Monroe. I'm going to go for Marilyn Monroe.
Yeah, someone's
you don't know
someone
her
in the
arrangement.
audience- Someone in the chat's gone for Marilyn as well, but unfortunately, no one's got it right again. Elizabeth
What?
Taylor.
Oh, did I say Whitney? Oh, I'm sorry.
I've got to take your first answer, Christine.
I know.
I'm terribly
I'm
sorry.
bugging you.
All right. So I don't think anyone scored on that, and I hope you're
Oh, the
all honestly.
perfumes?
Yeah.
Seriously?
Yeah,
Okay.
Apparently, I've not
Yeah.
heard of them, but it's not likely that I would have done really.
Okay, because if
Okay.
you're wondering how much money an estate makes, you got to look at what investments the state has. So, for example,
I
Michael
can only
Jackson.
think of her perfume.
I didn't even think
Yeah.
of it.
Royalties
Michael
on the
Jackson
music
was
for
the
Whitney.
top, but the question was which woman was at the top of the list.
I know. But as an example, Michael Jackson, of course, is going to make a lot of money, not because he's Michael Jackson, or dead Michael Jackson, but because he owns royalties to a bunch of...
Beatles music,
Like the
and
Beatles.
his own
Whitney did
music.
most of the music.
I have
They
to
did-
say, I did this quiz a couple of hours ago, and my answer was Whitney, for pretty much the same reason as yours. Anyway, let's move on. We don't have all night to do this. Okay, next question. Can you see that? Yeah, there we go. What contraband substance did Russian police find this week when they stopped a speeding hearse in the city of blah, blah, blah? Caviar, mink fur, French cheese.
Is it a French
I'll go
cheese
with mink.
caviar?
I'll go with mink.
Yeah, okay. We've got one mink. In the audience, we've got French cheese. We've got a lot of French cheese. We've got
Mink.
one mink fur.
There is a social political reason that mink fur makes the most sense, but French cheese is funnier.
Yeah, but
Right? And
there's
I'm going to say
socially.
French cheese.
Don't they have giant meat farms there, and don't they have like a crap ton of caviar? So wouldn't the one that makes the most sense sort of?
Yeah.
Wouldn't French cheese be the only one that sort of
But there's a
stands
black
out?
market. There's a black market for caviar.
But would you
really
move it
is.
around in a hearse?
You've not given an answer yet, Concordance?
Oh, I'm going with French cheese.
And
Yeah, French
Christine?
cheese.
Well, I'm just going to be the outlier then and go caviar because I know they got a black market for it. But
There we go. Christine always amazes us. Caviar
this is true.
is absolutely correct. The hearse
Yay!
driver claimed to be late for a funeral, but on opening the coffin inside, police find no body, but half a ton of illegal caviar worth 10 million rubles, which is the equivalent of $150-ish thousand dollars. I actually got that. I scored
That's
pretty
astonishing.
badly overall, but I got that one right. Now the next question, the final question, I think is quite fun. And again, hopefully you can see this. End tampon tax is the banner that's been
Yes.
held. And
Yeah.
but don't jump up and say I know what the answer is because
No, I'm saying
don't have
I
the questions yet,
agree.
MPs
I agree.
We
voted.
just had this debate here, so
MPs
Yeah.
voted against forcing the government to cut the 5% rate of VAT, and we all understand what VAT is. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
not
Yes.
just a, yeah.
the UK
On tampons, on the
Something
inspired
foreigners have.
250,000 strong petition which had called for the tax to be abandoned. Tampons are taxed because of a decision made in the 1970s not to class them as a basic item of everyday life. But which of the following items was deemed to be essential and granted a zero rate tax? Was it
In the 1970s.
men's razors, Jaffa cakes? Do we understand what Jaffa cakes are?
I
Yeah.
don't know what those are.
Or
No.
bicycle pumps?
What are Jaffa cakes?
What are the audience saying here?
And this is Britain,
Somebody's going to have to tell
so
me what a Jaffa cake is.
A Jaffa cake is a sort of
like a
Cake made of
cookie.
Jaffa.
a confectionery item. It's sort of like chocolate on the top and I don't know what on the bottom with a smidge of orange sort of like jam in the middle.
I'm going with
Okay.
that. I don't care what the right answer is. That's funny
Yeah.
enough.
You're
I'm going
for
Jaffa.
Bis-
you're
Because that
going
is
for
an
Jaffa
essential
cakes.
item of life.
Right, you're going for
Biscuits
Jaffa
are a
cakes.
big deal, but I'm not going with Jaffa. I'm going with bicycle pumps.
Okay.
Although razors,
Jaffa
oh,
cakes,
geez,
yeah.
I don't know. Yeah,
Razors
okay,
are
bicycle.
huge revenue, though.
So have we got an
Yeah.
answer from Ozzy yet?
I'm going Jaffa cakes.
We've got
Yeah,
concordance Jaffa cakes.
razors. Men's razor seems to make the most sense, but I'm going to go with Jaffa cakes because these are also
You're
offbeat.
going Jaffa cakes, right? Okay. And
'cause
Christine,
it's
you're going Jaffa
I'm going
cakes.
with bicycle pumps.
You're
I'm
going
weird.
bicycle pumps. Aaron, what are you going for?
Razors.
Razors and Hogtie?
oh, Jaffa cakes.
What is the obsession with Jaffa cakes?
We just learned about
Because
it.
you
We think,
Because it's
only sell them
true.
there.
I didn't know they existed 12 seconds ago.
oh, there's
Just-
Oh, you weren't cheating, were you?
Was it just Jaffa cakes or all biscuits?
The reason that they are exempt from tax was after a long court battle to prove that they were cakes and therefore essential rather than biscuits, which are a luxury
snack
item.
food.
Let them eat Jaffa cakes. That was the idea.
She never
No,
said
I guess
that.
because
So come on.
There's-
No,
out
you're
of
right.
those
Marie
7
Antoinette
questions-
never said let them eat Jaffa cakes. She
out
never
of
said that.
Out of those
And
7
biscuits
questions,
and gravy are somehow not essential, but cake is.
Right. Yeah, well,
no, there's a
Not
parallel.
that kind of
Hey.
biscuits. All right.
Like here we have the goods and services tax, and it's you don't tax milk, so the essentials are not taxed, and of course we
Red
don't have
milk.
goods. Yeah, and we don't have GST on Pepsi as Louis because otherwise, what would the people of Quebec eat for breakfast?
Exactly.
and
There are 8 people in the audience who get that
does
reference.
also say, it does
I got
also
it.
say, Aaron, that this was after a long court battle. So if I was a lawyer, I might have some better understanding of the reasoning. But hey, there we go. So
Well, the same thing's
honest-
going on
honestly,
here right
you've,
now
You've all
with
been
tampons.
keeping your own score. Who and this is a question to the audience as well. How many answers do you think you got correct?
Oh, I did horribly.
I only got one.
What? Ozzy, that's
Jaffa cakes.
That's so Canadian honesty of you. It's wonderful.
I got 3.
Might have got 3.
I
Maybe.
think I got 8 right. I got 8 of them right.
Well, is it
Honored.
Blackpool? Said he's got 4. I think and Quantum Overlord thinks he got 4. So that's good. That's good. Anyway, I've got one more quiz question, which will take me a second to set up, and then we'll get on to more serious things. What have I got on? Oh, I don't know what I'm about to open. Oh yeah, we can get rid of that. Decline of. Yeah.
I wanted to tell you that we're just doing the tampon thing here too for the first time, where people are finally saying, "Yeah, maybe that is an essential thing." Because I couldn't imagine everyone refusing to wear that product all at once. I think everyone would agree. Yeah, maybe we should make this essential. Anyway,
It's
essential. I've never needed it.
Use them. That's the hat, right?
Yeah, well, the argument turns on a slightly different issue, and it's somewhat interesting because it's not a new argument. It's back when they were actually instituting the GST, and they were making this ridiculous cataloging of, well, we can't tax milk ever, well, unless it's chocolate milk. Well, no, if it's 4 liters of chocolate milk, well, then we won't tax it. But if it's they always tax chocolate milk. But a 250, like the 1 cup of milk that you buy in the little single serve carton, it does have tax. Peanuts
Yogurt.
if they're salted, but not if it's a smaller thing. Like, it was just all this ridiculous rules. And they said, okay, well, what about these feminine hygiene products? This issue was raised many years ago, probably 20 years ago. And the grounds for arguing it was that this was a tax that was selectively for one gender over another. And it's a very weird legal question, because the fact of the matter is, whoever purchases tampons has to pay goods and services tax on it, and the provincial sales tax if applicable, if you're in one of those provinces, which I'm not. And people would 20 years, 2 decades, we've been arguing about this question, and finally recently went, just don't tax the tampons. Just stop arguing about this.
do you really want to piss someone off who needs tampons? You don't. It's not a safe bet. It's not. You're taking your life in your own hands.
I need razor blades.
I got a question that will follow on from
use those
this.
razor blades on you if I were needing tampons. Tax me.
How many pages do you guys think is in the U.S. tax code? How many pages long is the
4.
U.S. tax code? Give me a ballpark. What do you
4.
think?
I would say that we're running into several thousand.
Yes. Give me just a number.
I would probably go as high as 10,000 pages.
Yeah,
That's what I'd say too.
10 to
I'd
11.
say
That's
10.
That's 10,000? 10
Yeah.
to 11?
Yeah.
Okay, it's 74,000 pages.
Yeah, you don't need that.
So we talk about these special exemptions and all these unusual whatevers. It's 74,000 pages of our tax code. And that's because every time somebody gets a bright idea, we should stop taxing this under this scenario and these conditions. And then, of course, you got to redact everything that came before. And this is the reason why sort of accountants are a requirement for anyone with anything more than 1040 EC. And that's what happens to government, is that just goes so out of control.
Yeah, it's because you have so many tax lawyers trying to find loopholes, and then they try and cover up the loopholes, and then they find new loopholes. I don't know what it would be in this country. It's not an area of law that I would ever even consider going into. But here's the last question, and this is one that actually goes back a couple of months. And I've been trying to find an opportunity to use it. And if you can't see,
No.
someone's marching around. If you can't see, I know the audience can, and a couple of people can't. So you'll have to. If you can't see it, you'll probably have to exclude yourself from answering this question. But basically, it is a picture of a number of rows of traffic approaching what appears to be a roundabout with a turn-off to several sort of like stores and takeaway places to the left. And the question is this, and you've got 4 choices on this one. What is the headline behind this story? Is it related to climate change? Is it related to women making too much noise during sex? Is it related to KFC spraying food scent onto the road to encourage people to take a turn left and eat their food? Or is it D, is it that on average 67% of headline photographs are out of focus?
I'll say KFC, because I can see the KFC sign and drive through, and it looks like people are merging left to go to KFC. So I'll go with
But see, that wouldn't work. You'd be too late, right? I think because it's the kind of thing that DPR was searching for, it's going to be sex related. Because I don't know the story, but I know DPR.
Right,
It's sex noise. It's sex
we've
noise.
got two going for sex noise.
I can't
wait.
see the photo, but
Yes,
I
you
can
can't.
guess
But
that there was a rumor.
there is a KFC sign
Okay.
slightly hidden on the left-hand side.
But I think there's a rumor that there is a run on Jaffa cakes and people rush to the store to buy. No, I think it's the sex noise.
Wait, is the objection that women make too much noise during sex?
Well, that was an interesting thing, wasn't it?
Who are these women?
It's a little vague.
Yeah,
So, I can't
have you ever
believe
heard a
we've got-
car alarm go off? I mean, everybody's heard car alarm go off, right? Nobody cares anymore if the car alarm goes off. But if the car alarm didn't make that car alarm noise, if the car alarm instead made the woman having sex noise, then everybody would pay attention to what's going on in that car.
Well, concordance
This is
saying
true.
the smell
It would turn
wouldn't need
heads.
to be enough early enough. Well, yeah, but if you're looking at the picture concordance, the turn off is like 100 yards past the sign at least.
Now, see, I know they do that in like enclosed areas like malls and airports. Because oh god, what was that Cinnabon place?
Cinnabon does
Oh,
it,
yeah.
yeah.
Spraying that crap out because it bypasses my rational brain. It goes right to the dinosaur portion. But it wouldn't work in enclosed cars in an open area. It would dissipate too quickly. Wouldn't be effective.
So
The story wouldn't have to be about traffic.
You're sticking with sex noise. Is there anyone else going?
Because I know you.
Anything other than sex noise? Is the audience going for anything other than sex noise?
Checking.
Okay, let's find out. If I scroll up, hopefully, we'll find out what the answer is. There we go. At least 4 out of 5 of you were right.
You're
And
so
Concordance-
predictable, DPR.
And concordance, your reasoning was absolutely spot on. Because I looked at, I saw the story, and again from the BBC website, and I saw it, and I read the headline, and then looked at the picture, and I just thought, what on earth has that picture got to do with the headline? But then I thought, well, how would they actually put a picture, a headline picture under that story that was not innocuous, or they're not going to be able to do anything too sort of like dramatic, are they, with that? But yes, if we scroll down, a woman who breached the court order that barred her from making loud sex noises has been jailed. Gemma Whale of Small Heath, Birmingham, was given a 2-week prison sentence for breaching, I think, it was breaching an antisocial behaviour order, which probably means nothing to the majority of the audience. But
Well, that explains the photo, though. That's a photo that shows the town Small Health. That's why they chose that photo. They
Small
needed a
Heath.
photo.
it's
Yeah.
small,
Small Heath.
Small
Yeah.
Heath. Yeah.
Small Heath,
this is-
Small
this-
Health.
That's what
All
tipped
right.
me off. There was
She's
a little
out.
subcaption. So what's weird about that? It wasn't just that they arrested her and they said, well, "We got to do something about this." They arrested her, or she was for some reason brought before a judge and was issued this order comparable to a good conduct order, something like that. And she was sent out like, "We're not going to charge you, but you have this order to keep the peace in some way." And then she was brought back after doing it again.
Yes.
Wow. Is there just nothing better? Like, what's going on over there in Small Heath,
apparently
Birmingham?
people-
that-
Just as a matter of
people in
personal
Small Heath
interest.
are
Are people
making-
not breaking car windows or selling crack on the streets of Small Heath? Like they got nothing better to do than deal with this?
Just as a matter of personal interest, did she also get in trouble while in prison?
Oh, that story writes itself.
History does not record. Okay, I've got one more story, and this now moves from the trivial to what I think is a much more serious issue. And again, through lack of time and laziness, it also comes from the BBC website, but it comes from the science department or science section. And it's something that sort of like struck me as being a little bit odd. Again, I'll have to. I think if I just do that, yeah, there we go. That will do. People should be able to see that now. Obviously, Aaron and Christine can't. But the report is an incredibly small report. It was published yesterday. NASA tracking asteroid TB145 with radio telescopes. And the story goes on to say that an asteroid called TB145 will pass within a few 100,000 kilometers of the Earth. Astronomers only discovered its existence this month. Scientists say it will not hit us for at least 100 years. This is
Well, I'm relieved.
I know it came out on Halloween Day, but this isn't April the 1st.
Yeah,
But,
why does it sound like such a good news, bad news joke?
Well, I don't know, and this is what I was hoping that maybe the sort of like scientific minded people in the panel may be able to help me with. I mean, to pass within a few 100,000 kilometers of the Earth, that's like kind of where the moon orbits. The fact that they only discovered its existence this month, and this weird, I mean, it's a very short report, that, and let me scroll down so people can see just how short the report is, that it won't hit us for at least 100 years. But that's getting close. I mean, I just, and I guess my question was this to everyone is, we know that this has happened in the past, and unless you are young Earth creationist or some sort of denialist, we know pretty certain. I think that an incident that happened 65 million years ago, pretty much put the dinosaurs to death, so to speak, and given the number of events that we record, we're kind of well overdue for one, and here we are with something travelling that close, that's only just been discovered. Do you think if or what do you think would happen if a similar thing was found within a month that was actually not heading 200,000 kilometres away, or a few 100,000 kilometres away, but was actually heading towards us? That would be the end of us, wouldn't it?
No,
I remember
not every time. It
1989.
has to be big enough to be a risk.
I remember in
There are a lot of
1989,
stars.
they were talking about an asteroid that was coming within like 50,000 miles of the Earth, and it was like 50 miles wide, and they'd only just discovered it about as the time it was leaving, when it was no longer an immediate threat as it came by. So they didn't notice it until it was there. And 50,000 miles away is really close, and 50 miles across is really damn big. It's certainly big enough to wipe out everything from our perspective, wipe out everything on the Earth. And I had an interesting argument with people about this, saying that insisted that it would be impossible for any asteroid to ever damage the planet because they all burn up in the atmosphere, and they refused to accept that the atmosphere is not 50 miles thick. So what is an atmosphere going to do against a 50-mile diameter block of iron? It's not possible to burn that up in the atmosphere.
So Chicxulub, just to look it up, was 180 kilometers across. I think the impactor at Chicxulub, and what is this? A half a kilometer? Right, about less than half a kilometer, a third of a kilometer across, which is really pretty big. but not necessarily an extinction level event. It might cause some pretty serious damage. It might blow out a lot of dust, which would have a cooling effect, which might be a good thing. Who knows? But it might burn up. I mean, a vast majority of it might, depending on the attack angle, could be reduced. Yeah.
But concordance, you would accept, wouldn't you, if there was something of a significant size that actually did collide, and history records that such things have happened. Even a relatively minor one could so disrupt world economics, let alone the climate, that would be in serious trouble. And I also know that scientists are working on how best to try and prevent an inevitable impact. Are they getting anywhere? I mean, is the solution still like the stories I hear about sending nuclear weapons into space to try and blow it apart?
No. What they've done successfully is generate a bunch of movie plots, but they've not. There's no real solid plan.
Well,
they have to have.
We landed a vessel on a comet, right? I mean, if we can do that, we can land a little something on an asteroid coming in that just needs to deflect it. If it's far enough away, if we have enough time, we just need to land something on it. We can make multiple attempts, and it just needs to nudge it, right? Just the fraction of a degree of arc is all it would take. We don't have to blow it up. We just have to deflect it slightly, right? So, I mean, provided we had sufficient warning. Now, of course, I mean, it took, it was 10 years of planning to land something on a comet. But I mean, if we knew that something disastrous were heading our way, I think the powers that be across the world could get their stuff together for that. So I'm actually guardedly optimistic that we could avoid an event like that if it was far enough away and we knew in time that it was coming. If it was something like what Arne was describing in 1989, that something that grazed the Earth, and we only found out about it as it was happening, obviously then it's too late. But provided we had enough lead time, it seems to me the technology is now in place.
Well,
in place.
Go ahead,
in the
Arne,
situation that you're talking about, I really earnestly hope that they just send Donald Trump out there to deal with it.
Well, we'll use Donald Trump to deflect it.
Yes, exactly.
Well, I mean, this was part of the speculation. Remember, we talked about this on the show last year, whenever it was, about some of the speculation. Well, that was the whole point of having this mission. Let's put a robot on a comet just so we can do it. Was as preparation, just to make sure we have that kind of readiness. But what we're able to do is to put something. How big was this thing? Smaller than my kitchen table.
Washing machine.
A washing machine. Okay, for the sake of with 10 years of planning. To get it up there and to have it do short-term radio communication with us. Well, it'd be great. Well, we don't really need to blow it up. We just need to put a little rocket on. We're not even close to that sort of thing. Now, I imagine with the amount of time, it can be done. But remember, we talked about this on the show before. There was a lot of wild speculation that this was sort of like these space agencies practicing for these extinction events. And no, they weren't. They sent the thing up there. It was too tiny to be any effective to do anything, and they kept it in the sterile room for the longest time. And it went up there with little tools to be able to drill and bore and get samples and do biochemical testing, because that was the function of that device. And so we can sort of pat ourselves on the back as a species for making that achievement, for being able to put that sort of an investigative tool out on a comet. Again, let's be amazed by that. But no, until we have something to work with, until we can point to something in the sky and say, this is where this thing is coming, what are we going to do about it? These ideas are just like, they're really sketchy whiteboard plans for, well, if we had one that was this big and we had this much time, I suppose we could try this or that. But, we just haven't been really faced. Yeah, go ahead, Aaron.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Yeah.
I had a question. If we don't have a topic, I do have a question like to bring up, since we have so many Canadians, we have an American doctor, and we have a Brit on the show. I'm getting a lot of criticism over the idea of the United States ever implementing a single payer system which is said to be comparable to what Canada and Britain have. I've been told, I have somebody telling me that I and other people are naive to imagine that such a thing could ever be functional, and that in the examples from Scandinavia and Britain and Canada are not functional. What I'm being told.
You'll have to explain to me again. The proposition is what? Single payer.
I'm being told by several. I'm getting a series of messages in my Facebook inbox from somebody telling me that I and other Americans are naive in thinking that we could ever establish a national healthcare system that could be functional, because and basing that idea on what Scandinavia, Britain, or Canada have is equally naive, as their system is not functional. I'm being told that people are having to flee Canada because of the inept health care, so that they can come to America and be saved. Let me see if I can just. I want to get some specifics, but of course they don't give me any specifics I can report.
Well, I can kick the conversation off in this way. Obviously, I wasn't around effectively the end of the Second World War, and the discussions that took place in '46 prior to the establishment of the National Health Service in '47. But what I can say is this, that those who opposed the proposition of a National Health Service in this country were the doctors and the insurance companies. And that seems to be the situation in America at the moment. It is whenever any propositions are put forward, any suggestions put forward, it is always the insurance companies and the doctors that are opposing it. The establishment of a National Health Service, I don't know how it happened in Canada. I'm sure Oktar and Christine and Ozzy will be able to help us with that. But the idea that it can't happen, and if you think about just how quickly it did happen in this country, as I say, the discussions effectively started in '46, and in the I may be wrong, but I think it was literally May the 1st, '47, that it happened, literally overnight. So it certainly can happen. There's no reason. I think that, as I say, what will prevent it in America is the power of the insurance companies over senators and governors and whatever, to prevent it happening. But as a matter of practicality, I see absolutely no reason why it shouldn't happen in America. And I'd see that Concordance is typing something, and I'll pass it over to him. But perhaps before I come to you, Concordance, someone from Canada can explain what the system is, how similar it is to our system, and how quickly it came into being, and also address perhaps a question that it simply wouldn't work. It works here very well.
Yes,
I desperately.
Oh,
go ahead, Ozzy. You buzzed in first.
Oh, okay. Well, I can't compare it to the British system because I don't know enough about the British system to say how it compares. But I mean, I think our system is enviably good compared to the system in the U.S. Having lived in the U.S. for some time, and seeing the kind of situations that people have to put up with because they can't afford insurance, or because of the unbelievable bureaucracy and paperwork that they have to do to keep themselves insured and to answer to their insurance companies. I mean, I think our situation is much better. With respect to the allegation that people are fleeing Canada to get health care in the United States, well, there's actually some truth in that.
I'll talk about that in a minute.
Okay, I'll just say this. Everybody in Canada can get health care. And what that means is that there has to be a triage system. It means that when my wife had an abdominal problem some years ago, and they thought it was life-threatening, she went in for a routine checkup. They did an ultrasound. They discovered that she had a growth. They didn't know what it was. Everyone thought, well, it could be cancer. The next morning, she was in with a specialist ahead of everybody else because if this was a cancerous growth, it had to come out immediately and it had to be diagnosed properly immediately. Well, that's exactly what happened. She just jumped to the front of the line, and it was discovered, oh, it's benign, it's perfectly okay, it can be removed, and it was removed. But it took several months, and it was painful for her to endure with this abdominal growth that she had. Perfectly benign, perfectly harmless. She was fine. She recovered from it. But we were sort of gnashing our teeth at how long it was taking before she could actually have that surgery. But we understood that there were people who had imminent, medical emergencies that were always jumping ahead of her, from one day to the next. And so her appointment, her surgical appointment, got pushed back at least once, perhaps twice, if I'm not mistaken. But we understand that in a situation where everyone can be treated, that's what's going to happen. But in a situation where some people are not going to get treated simply because they can't afford it, then of course, yeah, you're going to get people who are going to get better treatment and at the expense of people who don't get treatment. And what happens in a situation like Canada, where you have an American neighbor that works on that system, what it means is that people here who are impatient can say, well, I don't want to wait my turn. I'm just going to run ahead of all those poor Americans who can't afford it. And I'm just going to, pay what I can. But here in Canada, you can't just get ahead of the line. So you just have to ask yourself, which world do you want to live in? A world where everyone gets treated, but everyone's got to wait their turn, or a world where, well, everyone can get the treatment that they can afford, but that means that some people can't afford any treatment. So yes, there is some queue jumping, but I'm happy to say for the most part, it happens with Canadians who get impatient and run south of the border ahead of our American neighbors who are not quite so fortunate.
I'd just like to back that up. I'd say the majority of people, the very few people that move to the States for surgery because they don't want to wait their turn, are usually very rich and very entitled, or feel they're very self-entitled, and are more likely to, while they're down there waiting their 12 hours overnight for the next day's surgery that they have paid millions of dollars for, will bitch to anyone who will listen about how the Canadian system is broken because they're so entitled. And I think it's those squeaky wheels that people are listening to, and they're not, noticing the facts and listening to people who just like the one. Was it Ozzy who just spoke? Because I can't tell with my phone.
Yeah, it was Ozzy.
And not listening to reason when you hear people like Ozzy who just explain things and tell you how it really is. And reality is that our system is probably, especially for the price compared to what you pay in the end for the healthcare in the States, is much more, because you end up paying for people that go to emergency, that get care and then don't pay because they can't, and they skip out on the bill. In the end, your taxpayers actually pay more for a healthcare system that's broken, and we pay less for a healthcare that will treat everyone, and it will do
that's
it
the other.
based on care and not money, but what the client needs are.
Yeah, that's one of the other complaints that I'm getting, and this is coming from a doctor, as you might predict.
Mm-hmm.
It is that that there's no way that a national healthcare system would be less expensive than paying for the broken system that we have. That I am foolish, and all I'm doing is citing an economist, a professional economist, gives this report on comparing if we had a national healthcare system versus the system the way that it is. Right, this well-published economist puts out this report that's cited all over the news, and I'm being told that I am naive for citing the news and the reporting on this. That's all I'm doing. I'm just reporting what the news is saying. But I'm being told that it's not possible that it could ever be cheaper by being more efficient, that it wouldn't be more efficient, and it wouldn't be cheaper, and it wouldn't be as good, and it would cost people's lives, and people would have to flee the country to go get medical aid somewhere else. And that the United States is the only place that provides the kind of medical care that people can run to in an emergency when their own national health care systems all collapse.
Concordance.
So I think it's worth noting that between 45 and 60% of all medical expenses in this country, in the United States of America, are government payments. So we don't have a single payer system in the way that a lot of other governments do. But at this point, a majority of payments are being made by the government. We have, I would say, a hybrid system for those people who are, let's say, receiving veterans assistance. They actually tend to receive better quality of care and generally at a lower price. Who it tends to hurt are the providers of services. That would be, in some cases, very highly paid specialists and drug companies who depend on insurance negotiated rates, and a small insurance company does not have a lot of leverage in negotiating the price of given services. That also creates a certain amount of issues where you have to be able to code something a certain way in order to get paid for it under the government systems. And there are some cases where services that are received can't be coded a certain way, and there's a great deal of fraud as well. So where I'm going with this is that the lines are often very starkly drawn between, right, the US and everywhere else. When in fact, within the US, the majority of people are receiving a sort of type of single payer system under Medicaid, Medicare, veterans assistance, a number of other government programs. What's, I think, the most unusual about the US, and what a lot of people don't understand, is that it's almost impossible to buy insurance as an individual. You can only buy insurance through your employer. And the employer does a great deal of subsidizes the cost of that insurance. So it's sort of up to the employer to what extent they feel their employees need benefits. And they're going to contract with the lowest cost insurance company they can. And over time, I think that's led to a lot of people losing out on, even though they have insurance, through their employer, they're paying more than they necessarily should. It's also not legal, I think, at this point, I haven't kept up with the laws very well, to buy insurance out of state. You have to buy through one of your local companies, which was something that I think the Republicans were championing, the idea of a nationwide insurance collective. So all of these things are very odd. There's no rational reason for them. So while I don't know if the single payer system is the best system, I know it certainly would be damaging to some of the innovation that we depend on for private pharmaceutical, for-profit institutions in the U.S. On the other hand, I don't think it's benefiting patients very much. I don't think it's benefiting the cost of healthcare.
Can I say something to that?
Sure.
I think the pharmaceutical companies will have to live with, $1 trillion profits as opposed to maybe $1.5 trillion profits, and I think that's okay. I think a healthcare system shouldn't be run on the basis of profit. It should be run on the basis of client care. I also know that as a entire nation, we have the negotiating power when it comes to pharmaceuticals to negotiate better prices as opposed to small individual companies scattered amongst states that don't have 30, maybe, the amount of people that Canada has in their one company to say, listen, we're buying for this many people. We want it to cost this much. So we have advantages of having it the way we do now, for sure, when it comes to negotiating prices. And the fact that we base it on healthcare, not money, I think. Anyway.
Yeah, but the reality is that drugs are developed to make a profit, and you can point at the high profit levels for a lot of pharmaceutical companies, and I would agree with you. But a lot of that is because of the risks that they take. Bringing a drug to market is extremely expensive. If a drug fails at any point in that process, they're taking enormous losses. So when people point to the profits, they often don't look at the sort of 5-year average of profits. As an industry, yes, it's a very profitable because it's also very high risk. A lot of pharmaceutical companies of mid to smaller size tend to go out of business in the process of trying to bring a drug to market. If you are negotiating down, there's a possibility, and I think it's always good to put the pros and cons out there, that you're going to stifle innovation, that these companies will stop taking big risks. They will not develop a risk-filled pipeline. What they'll do is they'll modify an existing drug and try to remarket it under slightly different ICD code, which allows you to get paid 20% more. That will be the strategy that a smart pharmaceutical company will take. So we tend to hold this out as sort of a carrot to entice companies to take enormous risks, not out of the goodness of their hearts, but because without that drive, without that reward, they're not going to take the risk.
Well, wouldn't we regulate companies so that they can't scoot around laws and just change codes and basically cheat for profit, and that they would have to provide a service and a good or a product that works? Whether that means 9 companies don't succeed but the 10th does, I honestly don't really care when it comes to healthcare. I think it's more important that we treat people.
I take a certain issue with you when you say that, Christine, because I can understand entirely what Concordance is saying. That for a drug company to spend what will be millions, if not more, on introducing a new drug, it is a risk, and as a result of taking that risk, if they come up with something successful, then I would have no objection with the idea that they should take a profit from that.
And they do.
Yes, they do. But my issue would be perhaps to what extent that they can profit, and perhaps also, and this is a question I posted in the chat, which perhaps Concordance didn't see, and it's not a question I know the answer to. For how long does a medical company hold the patent?
It's 10 years in Canada, I think.
And in America?
I'm not the one.
It's never that simple. It's never that simple because there's biosimilars, there's reformulation. I think the standard amount is 7 to 11 years, depending on the level of complexity. But they usually grant 5-year extensions beyond that. So most drugs have a lifetime of about 16 years.
I think Hogtie wanted to come back with something.
Yes.
Yes.
I wanted to come back to Arn's question about having this discussion in the United States about what people call universal healthcare or single-payer healthcare, national healthcare, goes by different names. Several points came up, so I did this. I doodled on the back of the envelope all the things I want to talk about. Arn, we could have this conversation off air for an hour. I'm going to pick out the few things that I think that sort of touch on your question and that hopefully the audience would find interesting too. So for one thing, what was I going to say here? You guys were talking about wait times and how long people have to wait for certain procedures and whatnot. And this is often sort of thrown in the face of like, well, Canadians sometimes have to wait in line for something. I will say, only as a teaser, I don't even want to get into this topic, the wait times are often something that is engineered into the system. Wait times are not always a bad thing for health outcomes. And there are many circumstances, in fact, most circumstances of waiting, they're there to, they're shown to have positive demonstrable health benefits. I appreciate that's like a crazy claim, and it could explain it. I just rather not use this occasion to explain it because it doesn't address your specific question about single-payer systems. So the first thing I want to say about that is, when you're talking to fellow Americans about it, I'm going to suggest to you, because I'd had this discussion several years ago, especially like when the Obamacare debate was coming up and whatnot, I really get the sense that it's a lot like talking with creationists. Like, there's a lot of myths out there. A lot of like, oh, well, if you go to Canada, they have like death panels and, there's just the crazy things they say about what goes on. They have one MRI machine for all of Ontario. I mean, it's crazy. There's a lot of myths that go on out there, and talking with them, they have this, they're susceptible to the same sort of myths, just like creationists and flat earthers and anti-vaxxers It's really hard to tell them what goes on in Canada and what doesn't. It's certainly worth educating yourself about it, because it's like any other, you've fought this battle with the creationists before, and you know what it's like to try to convince something if something isn't true. Because when you say, well, I know a guy in Canada who says this, that's not going to convince them. When you bring reports from Health Canada does surveillance on a lot of these different issues, you can show them that report, and they're going to say, well, of course, that's what the government says. They're going to have some way of dismissing it. So brace yourself for that battle. But the main thing I want to say about this is direct response to your question about how should this conversation take place in the American culture. And to answer the question, I want to ask real quick, it doesn't have to be a big discussion, but how many single payers are in the single payer system in Canada? Aaron, do you know?
I have no idea.
There are 13. What percentage of what percentage of Canada's federal tax revenue goes to pay for our national healthcare delivery?
Well, I wouldn't have any of these
I think
answers.
Right.
I think it's 6%, isn't it?
It is 0%. We don't have a national healthcare program.
I don't understand.
You don't, and most Canadians don't.
You have Medicare, don't you? Is it Canadian Medicare?
No. What we have is the Canada Health Act makes it mandatory for each individual healthcare jurisdiction to have their province or case of territory, and then there's others, the military and the prison system. I know you cannot this very second. Did you hear? These guys were talking for so long, they finally let me on the mic. Go. I'll be right there. Hog ties all energized. This is one of my pet topics. Yes, there are multiple single-payer systems in Canada. There's nothing universal about it. So British Columbia has their own policy, has their own thing. Alberta has theirs. Saskatchewan has theirs. The territories, the military, and the prison systems all have their own healthcare systems. So what the Canada Health Act specifies is that each region has to have one of these systems in place, and it has to meet certain criteria. And additionally, if it meets some other criteria, then there's significant transfer payments that come from the federal government to help support those provincial or territorial health insurance plans. Just 1 second. I cannot believe it's just they start acting up as soon as I get on. Well, maybe they're reacting to my energy because, like I say, this is one of these topics I'm passionate about. So the Canada Health Act says, look, you need to have a health insurance plan for the people of your region, whether it's a province or a territory or a prison system or the military. We're going to give you some general criteria for how that's going to happen, but we're going to let you figure out how to do that. So Alberta's got their way of doing it. If I call an ambulance right now, I have to pay $400 to get the ambulance to come and take me to the doctor. People in Ontario hear something like that and they go, Albertans are crazy. Why would they do it that way? But the point is there's to say the thing that makes Americans frightened about universal health care is this centralized government is going to make all these big decisions, and there's going to be somebody from Obama's government there to decide whether or not you get 1 aspirin tablet or 2 aspirin tablets, right? These are the fears that the Americans have. And even in a place like when you point to Canada and say, well, look at how this communist regime they've got going up there. No, if you cross the border into the next province, you've got a totally different healthcare system, right? And what it's allowed for is diversity in development, or the development of diversity of these different healthcare systems. What the Americans need to be sold on is this idea that you need to have a national mandated system, guidelines for the systems. Criteria, thank you. The people of that state need to have access to these certain things. Just like you have federal rules for how to build roads. The federal government's not going in and building these roads. They still leave it up to the states, right? But you need to have those criteria for what a good healthcare program is. And now Idaho can go ahead and make their Idaho insurance plan, and Colorado and so on. And you can have 50, 60, actually when you add in all the little territories and whatnot, you probably end up having about 50 different single payer system healthcares. So to wrap that up, what I'm saying is a person should educate themselves about the values of the single payer system. Actually, I have to make one point about find out how much it costs if you've got an ear infection or your kid has an ear infection and like just that pain in the side of your head. And it's so bad you go to an emergency room. Find out how much that visit costs. Now find out how much that visit costs us under the schedule of fees. It costs me nothing out of my pocket, but generally a $420 visit in Mississippi translates to a $205 visit in Alberta. I made this comparison a few years ago. Why? Let me wrap up on this point because I am now officially ranting, but I do it so rarely on the show. I'm kind of enjoying this one. When this economist says, well, how could it possibly be cheaper? Like, oh, it's so baffling how it could be cheaper. Okay, here's this is the system we're gonna impose here. I can't afford to. I'm in the States now. I can't afford to go to a doctor. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give a few bucks every month, possibly through my employer, or maybe a few bucks of my employer's money, to an insurance company. And I'm going to say, please, Mr. Kind Insurance Company, I would like you to hold on to my money for me so that if I get sick, you will then pay my doctor. And then my doctor says, hey, Hogtie, you're kind of sick. I'm going to need $25,000 to fix you. And I will say, please, Mr. Insurance Company, will you give that doctor some money to fix this problem I've got? And the insurance company will say, well, let us look it over. Let's think about it. Well, pre-existing condition, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Versus the Canadian system, where I pay into a NFPP, not for profit payer. The people that hold my money to go see a doctor don't keep my money. They give it to the doctors. Is that not obvious? When you pay a for-profit insurance company to hold on to your money and then give some of it to the doctors, and then you look at the Canadians that are giving their money to somebody to hold on to give all the money to the doctors, and then you say, well, how come there's a difference in how much it costs? Like, insurance companies, man. Like,
That's a good point. Can I defend something? I had two very similar experiences where I missed flights, one from the UK and one from the States. Both times I had to go see a doctor to get a medication prescription for a week filled so that I wouldn't go off. I was on pain medication at the time. Cost me $250 just to see an American doctor. That didn't include the price of the medication or the filling fee at the pharmacy. When I was in the UK and the same thing happened to me, I spent £40 to see a doctor, and they apologized that they had to charge me that much. Repeatedly apologized. And then I filled all the prescriptions that I had for £7. That's including the price of the medication and the filling fees of the medication.
The dispensation fees, yeah.
Yes, £7. So £47, which was probably about $80, $90 at the time, as opposed to $250 plus maybe another $150 to $200 for the meds and filling fees. So $500.
Yeah, I have a couple of things I'd like to add about this.
Please.
Hogtie is absolutely correct about how the Canadian system works. By and large, I mean, there are the exceptions, just the military and stuff like that. But the provinces and territories are required to put in effect a healthcare system. So it's not a national healthcare system. You can think of it as comparable to having like a state healthcare system, but it's everyone just chips in. And this is how we run our legal system. It's how we run our policing. It's how we run our military. You don't pay an insurance company to protect you against the bad guys and hire a private police force and hope your insurance company will foot the bill when the time comes, right? When you need a detective or something like that, right? That's not how it works, right? In everything else, we think, well, no, it just makes more sense to pool our resources, right? And distribute the cost, the burden, over as many individuals as possible. Cut out as many middlemen as possible. One of the things that sort of is burdensome in the American system is not just that there are insurance companies that are skimming off some of this money here for their own, because they are, of course, profit-driven companies. So they have to take a cut of your money that you pay for healthcare. But doctors themselves, hospitals, and any medical practice usually has to devote an enormous amount of time in paperwork and record keeping. They often have people I mean, well, maybe Shannon Rocky, if she were here, people know her. She worked in the healthcare profession, and she worked in dentistry. And anyone who's worked in dentistry or any healthcare practice will have some sense that there's usually some staff member there that does all or mostly the work of dealing with the insurance companies. There's an enormous amount of loss right there. So that's incredibly expensive. There's this huge bureaucracy that has to be built in simply because you have an insurance company. And now let me show you the kind of paperwork I do when I go see a doctor. This is my wallet. Okay, when I go see a doctor, or if I go into a hospital anywhere in Canada, not just in my own province of Ontario, this is what I show them.
Hold on. That's not.
No, it's okay. No one can see it. It's just got my face. Okay, right. This is what I show them. This is my paperwork, right? They just swipe it. It's got a barcode on the back and a magnetic strip, and they just swipe it. Okay, that's my paperwork. When I moved to British Columbia, and I lived there for a few months some years ago from Ontario. I've moved back to Ontario now. But when I moved to British Columbia, I wasn't yet a resident. I had not yet become a resident. I didn't qualify for residency yet. And I had to see a doctor. Well, all I had was my Ontario card. Well, I showed them my Ontario card. That was the only time I ever had to fill out paperwork because I wasn't yet a resident of British Columbia. So I had to fill out paperwork so that all of the fees that would be applicable to me would go to Ontario. Ontario was still going to pay for me in British Columbia. That's how it was going to go. And once I became a resident, then they would, ship it all back. British Columbia would pay for it retroactively once I was a resident. That's the only time in my whole life, I've ever had to fill out paperwork. I've never had to explain to an insurance company or some third party or justify that I was entitled to a prescription or a procedure or or an examination or a diagnostic technique or of any sort ever in my life. Every decision about what I need, what test I need to undergo, what treatment I have to take, what prescriptions I have to consume, all of that was decided between me and my doctor. Not a politician in the room, ever. And no middleman in the form of insurers, ever. That's never happened. And then I had a historical point I could make about this afterwards as well.
Sorry, can I touch real quick on that? And I apologize, Ozzy, for jumping on you for hauling up the card. I had a moment of panic there because yours is an OHIP card, and there's a portion of the barcode that's not in. It's like plain text encoded. So of still frame, and there's actually information that's successful in there. So I apologize for kind of wigging out on that. And I guess I could touch on the idea, but sometimes this comes up about, well, what happens if you break your leg when you're in Saskatchewan or whenever, and you don't have a plan for that? Well, this is one of the things the Americans have to then strategize when you say, well, we're going to nationally institute state-level healthcare plans. You have to wrestle with the notion of reciprocal agreements, so that, well, what happens if somebody was living in one state when he was a heavy smoker and then quit smoking and lived in another state, and then 5 years later got another job in a third state where he just got insurance but then got his cancer diagnosis? Are they going to stand around and go, oh, well, you actually went and saw the doctor before you filled out the paperwork to get our state's insurance, and then, oh, well, that's actually probably because of those cigarettes you smoked back when you lived in that state 10 years ago. Like, no, there's none of that discussion. What you do is ahead of time, you come up with reciprocal agreements that handle very specific issues like transients in the population, pre-existing conditions, things like that. And once you have that agreement in place, that's just the way it works, and everything comes out in the wash. None of the provinces complain about the content of the reciprocal agreements.
It even works internationally. When I was traveling in the States, when I lived in the States, when my wife and I both lived in the States for a time. We were not residents in the States. We were visitors there, sort of for an extended period, but we were there for many months for a significant chunk of the year. When we were there, we understood that if anything happened to us, we took sick or were injured or something like that, needed treatment, we would get treated in the States. We would pay out of pocket. We would then fill out a form, and then Ontario, our home province, would reimburse us for what it would have cost back home. And of course, everyone told us, you're not going to get reimbursed for what they charge you in the States. You're going to get reimbursed for what it would cost back home, which is a lot less. So you're going to be out of pocket an awful lot of money. But it even works across the border. Our provinces will actually take care of us when we go into the U.S. or if we go to Europe and wherever we go. And all they need is some documentation establishing that you had a certain treatment, that you were diagnosed by a qualified medical professional, and it has to be a treatment, of course, approved back home in your home province. But so I've even got coverage. It's just that it wouldn't cover me enough in the States because of the prohibitive costs that are there.
So the summary then would be, what I'm getting from all of the Canadians and the Englishmen in this case, is that going with a standard healthcare, a government provided healthcare system rather than the insurance companies is still preferable, or preferable to the insurance companies that we have now.
Yeah, absolutely, definitely.
Yes.
An unqualified yes from me.
Yeah, and well, that's what I seem to be getting from everybody that goes through this. And when I talk to Americans, I get an awful lot of opposition on this about, for all the reasons that this is the most horrible thing you could ever imagine. And I'm like, well, if there's a problem with your insurance company, I mean, I hear Americans complaining about their insurance companies all the time. And where they're being denied coverage that they shouldn't be denied, and that sort of thing. But when a system doesn't work, the people that have to use it are the ones that are complaining about it. And I don't hear ever complaints from Englishmen ever about their healthcare system. I'm thinking that's indicative of a not problem.
Well, I mean, people in Canada complain about their health. I mean, and nobody likes waiting in line, for instance. No one likes waiting in line, waiting their turn at the dentist or the post office. I mean, people don't like to wait. And of course, when you're sick or you're hurting, like as was the case when my wife needed a surgery, it was really damn unpleasant. I mean, she waited for several months for a surgery, and she was in pain every single day from before she was diagnosed to when she finally had the surgery. She was in terrible pain, and it was worsening. And it was alarming, and we were very distressed. We didn't like it one bit, but we also understood that this was not just red tape and bureaucracy. We understood that when they said, "We're sorry, we have to postpone your surgery," that operating room and that doctor has to operate on someone who's going to die if we
Yeah.
take you when we said we were going to take you. Well, we understand that's just we want to live in that world. That because the day is going to come where I'm going to be the one that's going to die if I'm not operated that day. And I'm going to hope that someone else who's not dying is going to say, well, yeah, I'll just wait. I'll just suck it up. It's going to hurt. It's going to be inconvenient. It might cost me in other ways because I have to pay for prescriptions longer or something like that, or seek other treatments. Yes, but that's the civilized world we want to live in, where we understand that it's not all about me, and just because I can afford to step over other people's pain and suffering, I shouldn't do it. We can appreciate that is in fact a better world to live in, right? Where other people are going to get the treatment that they need, right? As opposed to the treatment that they want ahead of those that might need it. That seems to me the ultimate moral argument here.
The situation as it is now, and we have everybody complaining about Obamacare, right? And it really irritates me that all these people complain about Obamacare, because as somebody else pointed out earlier, you can't get insurance as a single individual, right? I mean, I was with this company for 14 years. I was paying through the nose for the insurance for my family coverage. I had this massive deductible, which prohibited any kind of coverage. I mean, I can't go to the doctor because I can't afford the thousands of dollars of deductible, and yet I have this huge chunk that comes out of my check all the time to pay for this insurance I can't use because of the expense of it and because it's just not good insurance. And so finally get a Obamacare, and I can finally actually go to the doctor for the first time ever, which was a new thing for me.
Can I just sort of
Wow.
express
Wow.
something that I saw several years ago. But again, I think it sort of goes back to the difference between the general attitude that we have in the United Kingdom and possibly also in Canada compared to that which we see in the United States. I'm just going to play a very short video. It's the shortest version of the video that I've found during the last few minutes, and unfortunately, if you don't have Vaughan open or YouTube open, you're not going to be able to see this. But let me see if I can play this video very quickly. It'll take me a couple of minutes to do so, but for those that can see it, I am sure that you will recognize what I'm referring to, and it has to be, so far as I'm concerned, one of the most disgusting displays of inhumanity that I've ever seen in a civilized society.
Okay. And while you're setting the clip up,
I know what you're gonna.
Can I remind the panel, because you were kind enough to just real quick, because you're kind enough.
What I'm talking about here is the Teabaggers rally at Ohio, where they effectively pick on a man with Parkinson's disease. I hope that everyone can see this. I'm going to play it now.
Just wait, DPR, before you do that, you reminded the panel that they have to mute Vaughan. They should have Vaughan open, but have it muted, except during the playing of a video. The only way that you, for us on the panel, the only way we can hear it is if we unmute Vaughan during the playing of the video and then remute it.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I know that Christine doesn't have it open. She can't because she's working from a mobile phone.
I've seen the video. It's okay.
You've seen it. I don't know whether you'll be able to hear the volume. I know that Aaron can't, but let me just play it. And as I say, I think it is one of the most sickening things I've ever seen. But hey, we'll talk about it after it's been played.
At one point, a man whose sign said he had Parkinson's sat down in front of healthcare opponents.
If you're looking for a handout, you're in the wrong end of town. Nothing for free over here. You have to work for everything you get. Good to know.
No, I'll pay for this guy. Here you go. Start a pot. I'll pay for you. I don't want a handout. I tried. No, I'll decide when to give you money. There's another one. There you go.
You love a communist.
Go, start the pot.
All that can be corrected.
No more handouts.
As I said, that was the shortest video clip that I could find of it. There are longer clips of it. I honestly, I find it very, very difficult to express my sentiments.
Welcome back to Harvard. Well, President Obama's decision to release his long-form birth certificate, the original document
has... I don't know how that happened. I just find it absolutely disgusting that that anyone could even contemplate treating someone, a fellow human, in such a disgusting way, let alone the fact that they are treating their own countrymen in that way. Every time I see that video, it shocks me and shames me to think that. And as I say, going back to what I said at the beginning of the program, every time I've been to America, I have come across the most kind and generous and hospitable people. But then I see that, and I think, well, have I got America wrong? How can you treat a fellow citizen in such a disgusting way? And they treated him no better than a tramp, and yet subsequent reports showed that this person was not a scumbag, even though that should have any consequence. He was an ex-NASA scientist or rocket designer who was suffering from Alzheimer's, and they're there shouting at him, treating him in the most disgusting way, throwing dollars at him. I mean, what a disgusting, absolutely disgusting display of humanity. But this apparently is at the heart of the idea of whether you should have Medicare, Medicaid, or a universal healthcare system. And there may be problems with the healthcare system that we have, which I think are maybe justified in that, you know, you've got to, there are a limited amount of resources to expend on certain illnesses. But I'm terribly sorry, you will never ever find anyone in this country treating any other UK citizen in the disgusting, filthy way in which that person was treated.
Yeah.
I've seen that video, and I agree with you. I think it was disgusting, and not only that, I can't remember who was running for. I think it was a seat in Texas who gave a speech, and somehow it came up that people without insurance should just die, and the crowd clapped. Like, maybe Arn, you can think of who I'm
Yeah,
talking about.
yeah. I don't remember who that was, but yeah, I've heard comments like that, and that's supposed to be the better option.
Yeah. Well, this is why, Arn, when I was giving that encouragement that, like, this is a discussion that should happen in the States, and if it's a cause you want to pick up, definitely, you know, educate yourself about how these systems actually play out in the rest of the world, and then recognize that you know, some of your countrymen, and I appreciate it's a minority, but they always make the news, are loony, and they're not caring people. This is why I made the comparison to the creationists and the anti-vaxxers and the flat earthers, right? That you know, they want to be they want to be part of a public discussion. They insist on it. They demand it. They force themselves into public discussion of issues they don't really care about. Like, do you think the creationists are really fighting science education because they care about saving your soul? And no, they don't. They got their own weird motivations. And the same thing, these people that will do something like that to a person who's saying, hey, you know what, I've got a problem, and I just think, you know, I represent a group of people who would benefit from some help. If we had a system where we all help each other, that would be a good idea. And they, oh, wait a second, are you hinting at communism? Well, you're automatically an awful person just even for suggesting that. These are not thoughtful or caring people, and I think that it should be obvious that as much as Americans are willing to embark on this discussion about how they can have a system that where you guys help each other and you help yourselves while you do it, because it's actually cheaper with much better health outcomes, that you're going to be having that discussion with people who don't actually give a shit about the right thing happening or not the right thing happening. They just, you know, these are people who, as I've been saying a lot about the flat earthers lately, they're people who embrace their fundamental right to be wrong, right? In the States, it's so wonderful. Everybody's free to do these things. You're free to hold any opinion you want. You have the liberty to have misinformed, misguided, dangerous, wrong opinions. And there are people who feel there's no point in having that freedom unless you're going to exercise it. So they will get on the internet and rant and scream about a flat earth, and they will try to get, you know, exceptions to vaccine policies in schools, and who cares if it actually brings back epidemics of diseases that were pretty much eliminated, right? And that's the kind of thing you're going to be facing, that sort of an attitude. And I will grant it's not the Americans. We always say that when we're here. We go, oh, the Americans are crazy. I know it's not all of them, but yeah, this is the people you're going to be dealing with.
Can I say something to this? Oh, go ahead, Arn. You.
Well, I was just going to say that with the Obamacare thing, I mean, it's expensive. I mean, because there's some particulars in my case, but you know, I've got kids that I need to cover and all of that, and then, as I said, these other particulars, and we pay quite a lot every month for our health care, and even on the affordable healthcare system. But at least it is, as expensive as it is still affordable compared to what we had, even when I was working with this other company, because I can at least use what I have where I couldn't before. And I would like there to be a better, more efficient system, one that, again, that I can actually use. Go ahead, Ozzy.
I just wanted to say something about the motives of these sorts of people. Hawkeye said that, you know, they're not caring, and I presume he means they're not caring on this issue, not that they're uncaring in general. Having lived in the states and having lived in Alabama for a while.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, well, I wasn't a resident. I was there sort of as a guest half the year for 3 consecutive years. For about 6 months. Interestingly, we were only there for 6 months at a stretch, because you have to be a resident in Ontario 6 months of the year. If you're away for more than 6 months, you risk losing your healthcare coverage. We didn't want to lose our precious healthcare coverage, so we always made sure that we returned by a certain date, so that we would always qualify to remain residents of the province. So anyway, having lived there, I can attest to that the rumors are true about Southern hospitality. They are the most hospitable people, the most generous people, very warm, very friendly. When they say, hey, stop, they just meet you. You're talking for 2 minutes. You're walking your dog. You get into a conversation with somebody. And in the span of 2 minutes, they're inviting you over to their house for a barbecue the coming weekend. And then when they bump into you again, they're sore at you because you didn't show up, because it wasn't just a throwaway invitation. They meant it, and people were incredibly warm and generous and kind to us. They knew that we were outsiders, we were from Canada and stuff like that, and didn't know a lot of people, and they just welcomed us into the bosoms of their families. It happened again and again. They were incredibly warm and hospitable and generous and kind-hearted and helpful. I mean, they helped us out in so many ways while we were down there. Sometimes we had car trouble and things like that. Inevitably, though, we would talk about religion and politics because we were in the South, and of course we're atheists, and we don't keep that, we don't keep our tongues in our pockets about these sorts of things when the topic comes up. And of course, our healthcare system came up again and again, and I have to say they were just shockingly ignorant about what goes on in our healthcare system. I mean, they just had absolutely hilarious ideas about what goes on in Canada. Wait times of years and years and years, lines around the block to get in, unable to, I mean, doctors that are just incredibly poorly trained, no proper diagnostic equipment and stuff like that, like Hogtie said, there's one MRI machine, in the province, just preposterous ideas like that, right? And this is what we had to fight. I'm like, no, it's just, trust us, we live there. Everyone we know lives there. This is not how it is. There's a reason why we're happy to live where we live, and we wouldn't live here. Another fact that was kind of interesting is my wife and I are early retired. I retired at 40, and part of the reason we were living in the States is we were traveling around. We sold our house, sold all our belongings, bought an old used Airstream trailer and a pickup truck, and we drove all around North America. We wintered in the South, and we spent our summers mostly canoe camping and here in Canada. And when we were in the South living in an RV, people would ask, how is it possible that you're able to retire so early? Well, of course, we had some good fortune and some good financial planning on my wife's part, and we're very frugal. So a mixture of good planning and frugal living and a lot of good luck. But one of the things that we would always remind them is, if we didn't have the healthcare system we did, this would be impossible. You pay too much in healthcare. If we had to pay what you pay in health insurance, we could never do it. The most I've ever had to pay in health insurance was when I had to buy health insurance, travel insurance, to travel and live in the United States. I mean, that was a significant cost if we wanted to live there. If we wanted to live in the States, I would have had to have come out of retirement. So would my wife. So we were able to retire early, as we did, in part because we have the system that we do that is so affordable. That's how little it's costing us. When people say, oh, you're going to pay more, you're going to be more out of pocket, most people don't know what they're talking about. There's not a chance that that's right.
Well, it's like so many things. It's like so many things that they tell us in the States. I mean, when they talk about the criminality of drugs, for example, right, and all of the reasons why marijuana should not be legalized, and then once marijuana is legalized, and we see what that state's doing with it, I mean, like Oregon, how they turn over this huge profit from regulating, and from the dividends that they're getting or whatever, however it works. They're suddenly making money off of it, and they're going, this is a really great idea. We should have done this ages ago.
In fact, Owen, if I recall correctly, they made so much money that they sort of like had a couple of days of tax-free. And this seriously, and this was sort of like goes to a story that I did have lined up for us to discuss, which was the fact that many prisoners in America are now going to be released from long-term sentences for non-violent drug crimes. It was something I was going to discuss if we fell short of time, but I'll allow you to finish your point. But we've now got someone that wants to join us, so finish your point, Owen, and then I want to bring him in because I think his question is something that I certainly would like to discuss, and I would certainly like the views of the panel on this issue. So finish your point, Aaron, as I bring him in.
Can I add just one quick? Can I add one?
But also, I would like to make a point about the user.
Of course, you can. You carry on. I'll bring him in.
I basically made my point. I mean, we were told all these negative things, and then it turns out that would be a great thing.
Yeah, other people want to make their point, but I think this is an interesting one, and as I say, it's one that I would like to discuss. So I will just invite him to remain silent as I bring him in, whilst the rest of you finish off your points on this
Hey,
topic.
Chris?
Okay, I was just going to say quickly, for those of you who don't know me, I had a spinal cord injury in 2007. I had surgeries here, rehab. I now own my own home, and my back is fixed. I can walk again. I know that if I lived in the States and had a similar job, my back would most likely still be somewhat broken, and I'd most likely be homeless from paying for the cost just to sustain some sort of mobility without an actual cure.
Yeah. And Hogtie?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've had two spinal column fractures, and both of them didn't pay out of pocket for them. And they work with you until you're healthy, and you keep your job and you pay your taxes. And that's how we pay for it. Out of pocket costs for stuff. This is another one of this is why I say this without going into the specifics of it too much, because again, we'd be an hour into this topic. But just to provide encouragement, Aaron, if you want to discuss it, arm yourself with the facts. So, for example, how much are we paying for this stuff out of pocket? So, like any insurance program, there has to be premiums, right? It has to be funded somehow. So here you would look at each province. You're going to split the premiums into two parts. There's the public pay section, where the government just essentially, like through the income tax collection and the corporate taxes, takes a big sack of money every year and says, here you go, provincial insurance plan. There's your base funding for this capitation, for the number of people that you're responsible for. You're going to get that base funding. Number two, there's going to be the user, that is the per citizen premium portion. And that's a weird one. So there was a while where Alberta would charge, I think it was I won't say how much the amount was, would charge some amount of money, and Ontario had $0 for that user premium. I just real quick just pulled two of the stats right now. AHIC, that's the one for Alberta. Citizens pay $762. Okay. In Ontario, the current OHIP premium, that's the user portion, is $900. I'm going to make clear, I mean $762 per year and $900 per year. That's the user pay portion to get your primary health care coverage.
That's not per month?
That is per year, which is why I said it that way, because I knew this is how people would react. Now, hold on a sec. What if you don't have, I'm a student, or I'm broke, or whatever my problem is in life. I don't have the $900. What do you do then? Well, what we'll do then is we'll say, okay, well, this year is on us. So when you go to file your premiums, you make reference to your income tax return. And that turns out to be the same base funding strategy for both Ontario and Alberta. So where I say Alberta is $762 per year, that's the maximum premium you would pay if your earnings were greater than $20,000 per year. OHIP, Ontario, $900 per year. That is if you earned more than $20,000. Less than that, then it goes on a sliding scale, and there's a point. No, actually, wait, is 20 the, Ozzy, do you remember this? Is 20 the base where you start paying, and then it goes up from zero? The point is, if you're only making $12,000 a year, then the province says, forget it, it's on us. They don't even try to pick your pocket for the $762 within $900. And I apologize, I'm mentally distracted a little bit here, because I can't remember if it starts at 20,000 and then it goes up to a maximum of 900. I think that's what it is. If you're under 20,000, you don't pay anything at all.
Outstanding.
That sounds right to me, I think.
But
yeah, well, I know when I was a student,
I want to finish off this question from a personal point of view, if I may, before we invite Scott Positively Godless to bring in his topic. Over the years, when I've been in America, not only have I met Aaron and Christine, I've also met Matt Dillahunty. And during the course of conversations I've had with Matt, particularly when we were in Austin, and I said, I've fallen in love with Austin. I'd love to come over and stay here. He's just the most kind and generous person. He said, well, if you really want to do that and you really need somewhere to stay, you can come and stay at my house until you get yourself sorted out and whatever. And I thought that what an incredibly wonderful offer. And I did look into the prospects of emigrating, but because I'm type 1 diabetic, I just simply do not know how much that would cost me in insurance and in prescriptions in America. But unless I went there with a very generous employer, I think it would be financially impossible for me to go there. Anyway, let's move on, because we've got a caller whose topic I think kind of touches upon what we were talking about in the last show, and if I'm right, it certainly touches upon issues that I get somewhat irate about. So, Scott, if it's all right to call you that.
Yes, can you hear me okay?
We can hear you perfectly. What have you got for us?
Good. Good to talk to you, everybody. Hog Tie, you and I have spoken many times before. Hello to everybody else. Our show recently did our first live debate with JD Kane and Matt Slick. Aaron, don't roll your eyes. I know.
Oh no, it wasn't Aaron rolling his eyes. It was me rolling my eyes.
I just felt the thunder through the internet right now, just with everyone. When I say Matt Slick, everyone's like, "Oh God."
Yeah, I am, and I'll give you good reason why. But sorry, I'm interrupting you. You carry on.
No, so we hosted our first debate, which I felt went very, very well. And unfortunately, the stream cut out where you didn't get the final round. I thought we had a really good debate format where it's 3 co-hosts, 3 different topics. Nobody knows what the topics are, not even the co-host. But what I noticed was in the first round, if you haven't seen the actual debate, just go to youtube.com/positivelygodless. Yes, shameless plug. Matt rage quit in the first round.
Oh, don't worry about shameless plugs.
Okay.
No, seriously, send me a link, and I will
Sure.
put it into the description. Okay.
And I've plugged your show before on this show, although we neglected to put a link in the description. So.
Oh, you did. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay,
so
carry on.
In the beginning of JD's Q&A, that Matt, how do I say this? The whole non-answer thing really, really frustrates me, where I'm going to answer your question with a question. That's not how a conversation works. And I guess I want to know how you all feel about it. I know, Aaron, you've been into many debates with, well, one Matt Slick for sure, and that was an absolute nightmare for you because you were treated unfairly. But just any debates.
Well, at least he did exactly what I predicted he would do. I wish I got credit from my own side of that argument, that I did predict exactly what he would do, and he did it.
Yeah, the whole Sylvia Brown inside of all of us when we're talking to Matt Slick.
Well, no, well, hang on. Let's just deal with what I think I know what Aaron's going to say, but for the sake of those that may not have seen the video or understood the tactics that Aaron was expecting and predicted, Aaron, just expand upon that for us.
The position, their position, the creationist type position, is so weak that in order to argue against, anybody that has any understanding of the facts of the case, they have to argue against reality itself. So that's the first thing they have to question. When Matt Slick argued with Matt Dillahunty a week later, he cited the Exodus as evidence that the Bible is true. But the week prior, when he's talking to me, I was giving him reasons why we know the Exodus never happened. So if we know the Exodus never happened, then how can you a week later say that it's evidence that the Bible is true? Well, the only way that he argues that the Exodus doesn't happen is that I'm saying I know it because of these facts, this data. Well, you must not know the data, or the data must be wrong. Reality must be wrong. Everything we know about reality must be wrong, and so there must be this alternate reality. You don't even know if you're a brain in a vat. You can't know anything. So that's the argument. You can't know anything. And so I predicted that that's what's just going to happen, because it's always the first thing. As soon as I start explaining what I know that proves that they're wrong, they have to argue against reality. And so what he did immediately, as soon as I did the thing on the Exodus not being true, or within a minute of that, I think, he started arguing that I can't prove that I existed 2 weeks ago.
So let me ask you this:
Can
do
I
you think
hang on?
that?
Pause.
Sure.
Pause. 1 second. I'm really sorry, Scott. I get criticised for doing this a lot of the time. I think the criticism may have some validity to it, but that's not actually what he said to you, Aaron. What he said to you is, can you prove that you are the same person that you were 2 weeks ago?
Okay, but that's what he does. He says, I can't prove that I'm the same person that I was 2 weeks ago. He then adds to that I might be living in this illusionary reality where I have false memories. Well, so he's just said that reality is wrong, that reality is an illusion, and that I don't really know anything, and that I basically am living in the Matrix. The same thing as I'm a brain in a vat.
Oh, that's all right.
Sure. Well, first of all, I don't think one needs to answer that question. That was an evasive maneuver by Matt Slick. What he's trying to do is go nuclear, right? This is the same kind of move that presuppositionalists make. You're trying to argue some substantive point, all right? So some matter of fact about biblical history. Whether the gospel narratives are accurate, whether the Exodus actually happened, or whatever it is you're talking about, right? The reliability of the Bible as a historical source, or something like that. You're trying to talk about that, and then what they try to do is they try to sort of pull a first-year philosophy move. Well, how do you know anything? How is knowledge even possible? Well, most people don't have a well-thought-out epistemological position, right? And so most people are stumped, right? So they're just trying to ask you a stumper question, and there are lots of such stumper questions. How do you know you're not dreaming? How do you know that you weren't just created 30 seconds ago, and that you just have memories that you were created fully intact with memories that date back further than that, but you're in fact only 30 seconds old. How can you establish that you're the same person now that you were a year ago? These sorts of things. These are difficult, thorny questions. I mean, at first it seems they're easy to dismiss with sort of trite answers, but when you dig into them, they're actually kind of thorny. They're difficult questions, right? There's a reason why these questions sort of linger on generation after generation for millennia, and people are still sort of tangling with these questions. They're actually hard questions. You won't hear the people on the other side who are posing these questions, these presuppositionalists, or in the case of Matt Slick, he's a proponent of TAG, transcendental argument for God, which is sort of has similarities to presuppositionalism, although it's not strictly the same argument. What they're trying to do is go nuclear. What they're trying to do is suggest that there's something wrong with your worldview as an atheist. If you're an atheist, you can't account, without positing a God, for how knowledge is possible, how the self can be possible, where morals come from, how logic works. Right? They're just trying to go nuclear. They're just trying to blow up everything, right? They're trying to pull sort of yank the rug of rationality out from under your feet. That's what he was trying to do, and I think that's what perhaps a better strategy would be if you sort of recognize that that's what the move is. And I suspect that Aaron actually does recognize that that's the move. But if you sort of call him out on that.
Move.
Yeah, well, that is in fact the move that they're trying to do. It's an evasive maneuver. I don't want to have to argue on the facts. What I'm going to try to do is say, you're not entitled to argue using facts. You're not entitled to reason. You're not entitled to use logic. You're not entitled to use the concept of data and evidence. You're not entitled to use the concept of inference in general. You're not entitled to claim that you know anything, and so forth. That's what they're trying to do. And now you're no longer talking about what you were talking about. Now you're onto a different subject, a much harder subject, actually, as it turns out, and one which they will never bother to give you an account of their own. Based on their position, How do you account for these things? But they will confidently assert, in the atheistic worldview, whatever the hell that's supposed to be, you can't account for knowledge and truth and beauty and logic and moral values and so forth. They will insist that you cannot, and they'll scream in your face that you can't account for this. They'll raise their voice, you can't account for this. Like, really, you haven't established that I can't account for it. What's the argument for why I can't account for it? I haven't heard that argument, and I haven't heard the argument that you can. I just hear the assertion that I can't, and then I'm supposed to supply one. I don't know how we got onto this subject. Oh, I know how you got onto this subject. You didn't want to talk about what we were talking about. So, I mean, I think that's the way to sort of scotch and divest that move.
Aaron, I can see you're desperate to respond, but we have a guest caller, and I want to go back to Scott.
I'm sorry, Aaron. Ozzy, what you're saying to me and what I'm hearing is that, at least what I got from when we did our debate on Thursday with Matt Slick, as long as you follow my script. And on the topic of, we were talking about the marriage amendment in round 2. And what did Matt Slick do? I'm going to put something in the side chat. It's always wrong to kill babies for the personal benefit. That had nothing to do with what we're talking about. It wasn't a moral thing. So I guess what you're saying is that is everything scripted. And that's kind of what I'm feeling from him, because I'm going to go on the Bible Thumping Wingnut today, or a little bit later, and ask him, how'd you do? How did you think you did?
Well, can I say something to that about that move that he pulled there, that particular move? Yeah, go ahead, Hawk.
Oh, I lost it. Go ahead. But
okay, that particular move about is it wrong? Is it always wrong to kill babies? For the sake of one's own pleasure or for no reason or something like that. But what is the point of asking that question? It's so that the person will either say, no, it's not always wrong. I can think of scenarios where that would be acceptable or permissible, and then the person can act horrified, and the audience will be horrified. Really, you can imagine a scenario where it's acceptable to torture a baby, right? There, right away, you win a rhetorical victory. Or you'll say, no, I do think it's always wrong. I think it's exceptionally wrong. That it's never going to be a scenario where that's going to be permissible, right? And then he's going to say, oh, well, why? Why is it wrong? And then poof, there he's trying to yank
about that.
Now we're talking about, where does morality come from? How do you as an atheist account for morality? And it's always the burden shifting move. It's never
can I give you an
Matt
example
Slick
also?
answering a question. It's always him trying to get you to answer a question that he insists you can't, which he himself has not yet answered, except by saying somehow God just makes it possible, right? Without saying how God makes it possible. And insisting that you can't do it, and not furnishing a reason why you can't do it, except that you're an atheist.
Can I give you an example of one of the examples that I gave during a recent hangout? When I think the topic, or whether I introduced it or whether it was raised, is eating people wrong. And the immediate reaction that you have when you hear that is, eating people is wrong. But then it came to my mind, what about the crash in the Andes? Maybe
it was the rugby team
30 years or so ago.
Yeah.
And
the movie Alive.
Yes, that was the film that it was based on. And whilst my initial gut reaction would have been saying, eating people is wrong, then I've got to think, well, actually, why is eating people wrong? And if we look at that example of the Andes plane crash, and where people did eat other people, do I think that I am in a position to make moral judgments about them? I don't think that I am, because I don't condemn them for what they did. And I imagine that I would probably have done the same thing in those same circumstances. Now, that obviously can afford the theists to criticize me and others that believe in the same way that I do. Just absolutely immoral because eating people is wrong. Well, okay, well let's rewind that a bit. Why is eating people wrong?
Yeah, well, invariably it'll turn out to be circumstantial. They will depend on the situation. One can usually imagine a situation where the reasons why eating people ordinarily is wrong are absent, right? And absent those situations, those particular conditions, then it isn't necessarily wrong to eat a person. I mean, we can easily imagine a situation where there's simply nothing else to eat. You're going to die. There are dead bodies lying around. They're just going to rot if you don't eat them. Why not eat them, right? As horrible as it might feel, it doesn't mean that because you get an icky feeling that it is therefore morally wrong, right? But a lot of people are sort of governed by that.
I was
I
at
want to
that
toss
discussion.
something out here.
Oh.
There's a food company that I don't know what kind of food necessarily that they're selling, but there is actually a food company now that's making this food product called Soylent.
Oh yes, I heard about this.
They haven't mentioned any colors yet, but
I was at that discussion, and I think it was the distraction method. You were getting too close to a topic or a question that the gentleman couldn't answer, and then all of a sudden he was like, "Well, I got to ask a question to you. Is it okay to eat people?" Like total distraction.
Yeah, one. Well, this is why it's such an appealing. This is why it's such an appealing thing for them, because it's interesting to us. This is a different topic, right? We often talk about situations and events in the news. It's very easy to get a critical thinker, a skeptic, or somebody engaged in these exercises to start talking about these lofty things like what is objective morality, and that's why they do it in conversation. I think one thing that I've had to change in my style over the last few years, and actually I'm going to credit Alex Botten for being my inspiration for this, and Aaron actually to a large extent, because I've seen some of your live stuff on the street when you're talking to a guy face to face. You have to point out expressly when a guy does something like this. So you ask a question about, for example, marriage equality or whatever else, and they say, well, why would you say it's right or wrong? What basis do you have for saying right or wrong? Do you think morals are objective? And they're derailing you over there. You have to, at that moment, and then right again afterwards, you have to say, oh, okay, so you're ignoring my question. You're dodging my question. We want to talk about this now. Well, I take a whatever view of morality, and just give a super short answer. But anyway, let's go back to the question that I asked you that you still haven't answered. You need to repeatedly get on their case when they do something like this to say, well, we're now going to talk about some metaphysics issue or meta-ethical issue or something like that. You need to constantly remind them and anyone that's listening that you're doing this to dodge. And I do have another observation about the reading from a script thing or conversing from a script. But I'll save it because I understand other people have things to say. But I hope we can come back to that.
I also have to apologise. I'm not entirely sure that I was being heard on the channels that were published to, because I had muted the wrong microphone. My bad. But in case I hadn't been heard, I know that the people in the chat heard me. But in case I hadn't been heard, for the sake of the audience, my question was, can you describe to me what is objective morality? And give me, if it helps, give me one example of an objective moral act. That was my question. And as I say, I don't think people in the chat, people on the broadcast heard me say that. So I'm just repeating that. Anyone else want to pick up?
Okay. When the Christians bring you what they call as an objective morality. They're really talking about a subjective morality. It is the whim of God. Whatever God says is moral. So when God tells you to go kill somebody, then it's a moral thing to go kill somebody, except when he says no. So every second Thursday after 2 p.m., then it's moral and otherwise not. So it's completely arbitrary, and it's up to God's whim and entirely subjective. The only way to make it objective is when you have a decree from God, and then people say, well, is this moral? Well, yes, it came from God, but does that matter? I mean, how do we know that this thing is? It's the classic question. Is it moral because it comes from God, or does it come from God? I don't even know how to reverse this.
Does it come from God because it's moral?
Their classic response, though, is always, well, you can't know what God's true intentions
Yeah, but it doesn't matter
and
because
he can change his mind. I know it doesn't matter. I agree with you, but their inevitable response is, you can't know what God thinks, and he created us. He can change his mind any time. He
gets to do whatever he wants.
Yeah.
And it's always moral. Whatever God does is moral.
In that case, I cannot see that as being objective morality.
No, it's not.
You see, the only way to have an objective morality is when there are criteria. So that you take this act or this thing that we're discussing, that maybe God is against this thing or it promotes this thing as moral. Is it moral? How do we know if it's moral? Well, does it fit the criteria of morality? And then you have a little bit of subjectivity in that you have to get everybody to agree on what morality is. Well, there is a degree of universal acceptance on this one basic idea that was presented by Theoretical Bullshit in his treatise on objective morality. That in general, promoting anything that promotes health or well-being, happiness is considered good or moral, and anything that unnecessarily causes harm or suffering or both is in general immoral. Now, there can be extenuating circumstances. There can be, the needs of the few versus the needs of the one, and so forth. And there can be other situations that might affect that, but you have criteria to look at, to evaluate whether something is moral or not. And that makes it objective.
That kind of objectivity is what... Yeah, sure. I mean, what Aaron is describing is objectivity in the sense of intersubjective agreement. Okay, I mean, we can come to some intersubjective agreement, right? For instance, we can come to intersubjective agreement that this is a beer glass, right? I can hold it up, you can all see it, I can tap it, you can hear it, I can feel it, and in principle, if you were here, you could do the same, right? The facts in question are in principle equally accessible to any competent observer. They're not sort of private to me. There's nothing subjective about this beer glass, right? I mean, I am having a subjective mental experience right now of feeling it and seeing it and hearing it, and that, if you're watching this video and listening to it right now, you're having different subjective mental experiences, but they converge on positing that there is in fact a beer glass there. We are able to arrive at this intersubjective agreement. And that's what we mean by objectivity in most instances. But
this is what I would describe as an objective verification.
Right. The conditions of verification are what constitute or what generate the intersubjective agreement. And what a lot of the theists and people who believe in divine command theory are positing is something quite different. They're not positing any verification conditions on God's morality. They posit that God is objectively moral. God is absolutely real, right? And if he's real, then he's real. Okay, he's actual, right? But they say that God is objective in the sense that the moral propositions that they take to be true don't issue from us as subjects. They issue from another source outside of us. Just like, the truth of whether or not there's a beer glass resides outside of us, right? Of course, our knowledge of a beer glass is mediated through our experience, our subjective mental states, but the beer glass itself resides objectively outside in the world, in some mind-independent reality, presumably. they think the same thing about their God. Their God is outside. He's out there. But the problem is, what are the conditions of verification, if any? What is the decision procedure for deciding that God's decrees and commands are moral? And this is where Aaron is exactly right. We have to have some criteria. How do we establish that what God wants and what God says is right? Well, what they'll say is, no, that's the definition of morality. It says you, right? Where are you getting this from, right? Oh, I'm getting it from God. Says you again. Look, we're not agreeing here, so you can't rationally persuade me. So it's not impossible that they're right. The question is, they don't have any way of persuading us using that argument. That is not a rational argument that they're using when they say, this is just the definition of morality. What God wants, that's what we ought to do. That's morally obligatory and binding on us. That's not a rational argument that I should take up. I, as a rational being, should not accept that as a reason. That is not a reasonable. That's not appealing to what we ordinarily mean by moral, for instance. How do we normally evaluate an action as being moral or immoral? Well, it's using the very things that Aaron was alluding to. It has to do with actions and the predictable consequences of those actions. The predictable consequences of those actions, not whatever actually happens, because sometimes the consequences are different than what was predicted. But the intended or predictable consequences of an action are what matter. And these are things that conduce to happiness and health and well-being and flourishing. And things that conduce to the opposite of that, we normally judge to be actions that are undesirable, and we don't want people to do that, and so we recommend against that. And this, I think, is what constitutes the very meaning of morality. So I think that we have a semantic definition, a semantic constraint is what I'm trying to say. We have a semantic constraint on the meaning of the word right and wrong, moral and immoral. That is what informs our intuitions about right and wrong, and why we have as much agreement as we do about morality. Why we think that walking up to total strangers and just slapping the hell out of them is a bad thing, and why opening doors for people and being polite and cooperative and helpful and kind and honest and generous, and why we think that these pro-social behaviors are good things. It's because they conduce to happiness and well-being and health and flourishing.
Mutually.
Mutually, exactly. If there was only one person in existence, the question wouldn't even arise what's right or wrong. You would just do whatever you felt like doing. It would all be a matter of strictly your preferences. But our preferences are constrained because we're a social species. The kinds of critters that we are dictates what constitutes a pro-social behavior and an antisocial behavior. And so it's not just a matter of personal idiosyncratic preferences. It's not arbitrary what we think is right and wrong. It's anything but arbitrary. It's no more arbitrary what we think is right and wrong than what we think is good for your teeth in your diet, or what is good to put in your stomach. Right? I mean, there are in fact objective factors in the world that determine whether something is healthy or not. Okay, whether something is good for your body, whether it conduces to your longevity and your fitness and your constitution, and all these sorts of things. Now, there's lots of gray areas where we don't know. Those gray areas don't imply that there's no such thing as good health, right? What constitutes good health is open-ended, and so it is with morality.
Can I pause you there, because Owen has referred to the wonderful video, a treatise on morality.
Treatise on morality, yes.
Yeah, and I have to say, I think that's an absolutely wonderful video, and I pretty much support everything that Scott says in that video. But one of the points he does make is that to define what is good is to, well, within his definition, is that which increases well-being and decreases non-well-being. And I think one of the issues I have with it is, how do we know whether something increases well-being? Now, I'm excuse me, I'm going to do this, not because I'm not really interested in your response, but I'm going to, if I can, limit you to a couple of minutes to respond, because then I want to go back to Scott and then I'm introducing another caller who's got another issue. So I want to sort of like skip through this as quickly as we can, without being discourteous to you and Scott. But then I say, I will be introducing a new caller.
So, Arn has walked away, so apparently he's...
Scott, yeah, sorry, Scott.
I'm kidding.
You go first. How do we judge whether something is conducive to well-being?
You know, those are a lot of big words. I mean, we're so new to everything. We're just three idiots that have a podcast now. Now we're actually gaining momentum where we have to actually look up these things that people are bringing up to the table as far as, these words go. Conducive, I have no idea what that means. I'm at least going to be honest and not going to respond with a question. The
Okay,
DPR.
Ozzy, did you want to? I'm getting feedback and everything. Warrior, can you?
Sorry.
Yeah, can you mute yourself for a while? Thank you. Like Aaron, I think Scott's video was absolutely superb. I quote it many times, but I'm still sort of like kind of struck with well-being and how we judge well-being. Did you want to comment upon that? If not, we'll just go straight into Warrior's comments, and we can
Was that
come back
to me
to
or
that later.
Aaron?
Well, it was both actually to you, Aaron, and Ozzy.
I'm sorry.
I have a quick
As
answer.
I said, there's contingencies there, and what Ozzy mentioned, they're predictable responses. I mean, whether something is moral is only according to what we can determine is going to be the result. There's some degree of error there, but it's it's I guess it's a proof in the pudding kind of thing. If the predictable responses or the predictable results are that this particular action is likely to cause harm, then if this is what your perception is, then it's going to be judged as an immoral act.
Yeah, and I can say real quickly that to whatever extent the assessment of this brings harm, that doesn't bring harm, to whatever extent that assessment is of the consequences, to whatever extent that assessment is fuzzy or unclear or imprecise, does not in any way mean that these ideas are all akimbo and we have no idea what's good or bad or harmful or not harmful or good for your teeth or bad for your stomach or whatever else. You got to remind them of that. That's the card they play all the time. Is they say, oh, well, you can't prove that you're the same person you were 2 weeks ago. Therefore, you don't know anything and the world is all akimbo and all crazy. And as I say again, it's important to remind them it's a dodge when they say stuff like that. And it needs to be pointed out to the listeners.
Yeah. Look, if there be objective moral I'm sorry.
No, Ozzy, go on, Ozzy.
Okay, if there be moral facts, okay, they're going to rest on facts about us, the kinds of critters that we are, and the kinds of causal relations that we enter into, and the predictable consequences of our actions upon one another, upon our mental states, right? There are actual facts here, okay? If I walk up to a person and I stick them in the guts with a pencil, it's going to hurt, and they're going to hate me, and they're going to suffer, and people are not going to like me. They're not going to trust me. They're going to think this guy's dangerously unpredictable and violent, and it's not going to go well for people, including me. Okay. Now, if we were a different kind of species, okay, if we were all like Wolverine and you just stabbed a person in the guts and it maybe it hurt them, but they healed, the moral consequences, our moral assessment of that act would be very different. If we were like Wolverine, but it felt good when a person stabbed you in the guts, then, if it tickled, we might think that this is a kind of greeting, right? It's not harmful and it doesn't hurt, right? But the facts about the world that we live in and the kinds of critters that we are, that's what dictates whether an action conduces to happiness and well-being. And that is not arbitrary. We're in this world. There are facts that constrain what is healthy biologically and what is healthy socially, all right? That's not arbitrary, okay? And people are going to say, well, yes, but people will sometimes disagree. People will disagree about whether or not something is good for your teeth, for goodness sakes, or good for your skin. The fact that there are unanswered questions about morality is no more reason for arguing against objective morality than the fact that people disagree, that there are, in fact, genuine disagreements about how healthy a certain diet is an argument against the objectivity of the concept of health. Health is an objective concept. It's just that we don't have all the answers yet. Okay, so we don't have all the answers yet. Wow, big surprise. Moral inquiry is an open-ended discourse, just like the concept of health and medicine is an open-ended discourse where the facts are yet to be discovered. We've discovered some, there are some yet to be discovered. The difficulty here is people have this naive idea where morality is concerned. It has to work like logic or it has to work like math. You should just be able to figure it out sitting in your armchair, and you shouldn't have to experiment in the world. I think that is a fatuous and stupid idea about morality. If your objection to the idea of moral objectivity or any particular moral claim put before you is that there are unanswered questions and that there are gray zones, and that you should just be able, in any circumstance a person trots out, an imaginary circumstance, you should always be able to quickly and decisively say, this is right or this is wrong. If that's your idea of what a moral theory should produce, you haven't taken any moral philosophy, you haven't studied any ethics, you don't know anything about the subject. Anyone who objects to the concept of objective morality on that basis just needs to do a little bit of reading. Okay. And you will be disabused of that.
Given the time and the length that we've gone on, a wonderful answer, Ozzy. But got a new caller, Warrior.
Yep. I'm gonna say goodbye. Real quick.
You stay here. You can contribute as well. Yeah, please stay with us.
Okay.
I think it has to be
I'm
somewhere.
being shackled here.
Oh no, I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
If I got to run a couple of errands though. So.
Oh, okay, that's fine. That's fine.
Can I plug my show quick? Is that okay?
Yeah, of course you can.
Yeah, Facebook.com/PositivelyGodless, YouTube.com/
Send me a message.
Yeah, I will.
And
definitely.
I'll post it in the chat. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me on the show. I really appreciate it.
It's been great fun. Okay.
All right. Good night, everybody.
So we've now got Warrior with us. What have you got for us, Warrior?
Okay, on the basis of moral objectivity. Okay, mercy killing. This is for Ozzy, because I've heard Ozzy do most of the talking here. While I was in Iraq and Afghanistan, this is coming from a creationist perspective. Yes, I believe in God. And I know the Bible teaches us Christians, thou shalt not kill. But what about mercy killings? You see, okay, my buddies get blown up. Dude gets, he's mortally wounded. He's not going to survive that. Do I put a cap in him and end his suffering, or do I watch him suffer?
I think this is a well recognized sort of moral dilemma situation, whether it's the trolley problem or whether it's the fireman's dilemma, and it's something that can be discussed. And if you are talking, for example, about the fireman's dilemma, and for people who are not familiar with that,
I'm not.
A policeman or a fireman arrives on at a scene where there is a driver that is trapped and he is burning, and the fireman knows that he cannot get that person out, and that driver is going to be suffering in fire for maybe 1 or 2 minutes. Is it a morally good thing to shoot the driver, or is it best to let him burn and suffer for the next 2 minutes? Now, if you're asking me that question, and if I was sufficiently sure that the circumstances that are being described are accurate, that is to say, there is no way of saving this person, should I save them 2 minutes of suffering? My answer is yes.
Well, I think anybody's answer would anyone is inclined to say yes well, almost anyone is inclined to answer yes when the question is posed that way. But that's because the way the question is posed asks you to consider only those variables, right? It's just that, I mean, do we want police officers making those snap decisions, right? That's the problem, right? I mean, it's like the various trolley problems, or the problem of, 5 patients, land in an emergency room because they were in a bus crash or something like that, and they're all going to die. Can you harvest their organs to save one person? Well, most people would say, well, if they're about to die, yeah, okay, maybe, or we can just wait till they're dead. But what if there's 5 healthy people, one healthy person in the waiting room, and there's 5 people going to die because they need a transplant? Why can't we just take this one poor guy who's waiting in the waiting room and just carve him up and harvest his organs and farm them out and save 5 lives at the expense of 1, right? Well, geez, I mean, the sort of calculus here seems to be kind of the same, like you're trying to save more lives at the expense of 1 life, right? Why do our intuitions scream yes in one case and no in the other case? But I mean, you just have to take into account what it would do socially to us. How willingly would you go set foot in a hospital if you thought that was even a possibility?
Ozzy?
Sure.
Could I pause you there, Ozzy? Because this is one of the very few occasions where I think you and I would probably disagree and may have an issue.
Okay.
I think the policeman's dilemma or the fireman's dilemma is it's not compatible with the harvesting tissues from.
No, it's not. It's not. It's not.
It's in no way comparable at all.
Well, it's comparable in some respects, but I wasn't trying to make a direct analogy. What I was trying to do to draw out there is that, in the case of the fireman or the policeman who is faced with the prospect of mercifully killing a person with a bullet to prevent them from dying in agony over several minutes of being burned alive in a car, right? Part of the reason we balk at the suggestion that a person should do that is because we know that we always have to make such judgments under conditions of uncertainty. The thought experiment asks you, imagine it's absolutely certain that the person is going to die over several agonizing minutes, but you can dispatch him instantly and almost painlessly with 1 bullet, right? Under those circumstances, under the conditions of absolute confidence there, would you do it? Well, yeah, okay, yeah, sure. Under those circumstances, yes, I suppose that would be the humane thing to do. I would think that's actually morally obligatory.
Let's open that up to the audience and also the other members of the panel, because you're absolutely confident that you would do it. I am confident that I would do it. Is there anyone in the audience that would?
I'm not confident I would do it. I'm confident it would be obligatory. I don't know that I would actually have the nerve to do it. That's a different thing.
Well, okay. Well, let's see what the audience says, and let's see what other people have to say. I'm honestly, Ozzy, I'm not trying to pick a fight with you.
I'm not worried about it. It's fine.
I'll tell you the reason that I think that this is a particularly difficult situation to deal with, and it's because we cannot know for certainty that this person would die. And I think if we did know, then we would probably act in the same way, however difficult and incredibly awful it would be. I suspect that you and I would act in the same way. But what do the other people have to say?
I'll tell you one thing I find that these hypothetical dilemmas suffer from is the fact that they're so transparently hypothetical. They don't really map onto to real world circumstances, and I think it makes them difficult to answer. It's easy to say, well, I suppose I would do this, I suppose I would do that. So I want to give you a dilemma that's exactly parallel, and this is a real world thing. This actually is a decision that has to be made, and you'll see that it's free of this thing about so one of the problems is the imperfect information. Well, how do you know that for sure that the guy's going to die? Maybe you got to hold out hope that something might happen in the next 4 minutes, a miracle will happen, and the person might be able to walk away. Oh, but you shot him, so what are you going to do now? A real world. This was the one that really struck me a problem from medical ethics. It really, I really wrestled with this one. So there are several conditions where a baby can be born and you know that the baby will survive in the order of weeks, perhaps a low number of months. But this will never be like a fully fledged person that's going to go to school and is going to play soccer and get married and have kids. This is a baby that is going to die over the next few weeks to the misery of the family. It's a painful existence for the baby. And the family is willing to let go. So they're permitted to say, they'll say, okay, well, there should be no crazy interventions. You don't need to keep the kid on a heart lung machine to keep him alive. It is ethically permissible to stop feeding the baby in those circumstances. If they're being tube fed, you can stop feeding them. So the dilemma is, well, once you've made the decision to stop feeding them, they usually live about 3, 4, 5 days after that, and they die literally of starvation. And so the suggestion is, well, once that decision has been made, so we know instead of having them suffer for weeks, we're going to let them suffer for only a couple of days, 3, 4 days, then isn't it better? Because, I mean, obviously hospitals are fairly equipped. There's any number of ways that you can to use Ozzy's words for it, dispatch. You can very peacefully and painlessly dispatch these babies. So why don't we just go ahead and give them a shot of something that will stop them from breathing painlessly, and off they go. And it's,
we do that for dogs. We do that for dogs.
Well, I think it would be cruel to not do that for dogs. To say, well, this dog's got problems, so I'm going to starve the dog to death. And yet for a baby, this becomes a very, very difficult question. I remember really wrestling with this one when I was in school and, really struggling with it. Now, so the thing that's nice about this one is that you get away, well, for one thing, it's not a hypothetical. Because you understand that there are licensed professionals that deal with this situation in neonatal care.
Somebody has a lot of background noise.
Somebody's having a snack. Somebody's cracking open some Halloween candy. I was going to say it's a real world problem. It's babies, and also you don't have the problem of imperfect knowledge, because for some of these conditions we have enough of a database to know that there aren't miraculous cures for these babies, right? So except in the description of the circumstances, there is a certainty that this baby will die in the order of weeks if you continue tube feeding, and there's a certainty the baby will die in the order of days if you discontinue the tube feeding. These things are well established.
Yeah, well, I mean, Warrior's original question about you're in a battlefield situation. You know, your brother in arms, your buddy has been fatally wounded. He's going to die. He's going to die in agony. It's going to be slow. You're not going to be able to medevac him out of there. Do you just dispatch him quickly and painlessly? I mean, he might be begging for that, right? Or he might be in so much pain that he can't even do that. He can just be writhing in agony. What do you do? What is the right thing to do?
Well, sorry, that's actually
we just had a guy.
Sorry to interrupt, but that was the one reason why I want to say that why I think this example is superior in this way is that of the flaws that this example doesn't suffer from is, okay, so you're a guy who's trained to go out in the field and to shoot people and to take cover and things like that. You're not an expert. Your friend says, oh, I'm pretty sure I'm going to die. You're looking at him and it looks pretty messy. I'm pretty sure he's going to die, but you're not a doctor. You don't know. So
let's say you
Ozzy,
are.
you pointed out yourself.
Yeah.
Let's say you are. Okay. Well, one of the concerns of these things is the imperfect information and having to make the decision in a snap. That's why I say that the baby example is very helpful, because these are not snap decisions. You have hours to days to decide what you're going to do in consultation with the parents. And it's not just your judgment. You could line up 10 doctors to look at these babies, and they'll all say, if you continue tube feeding, this baby will die over the weeks. If you discontinue tube feeding, this baby will die in days. With this syringe, the baby will die in minutes. So it removes all the emotionality around it's a snap decision.
Yeah. Or even seconds, yeah. The reason I think that someone like Warrior sort of might agonize over a thing like this is because Warrior, you said you were a Christian, right? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, I mean, presumably you believe in the sanctity of life. You believe that life is sacred, right? As soon as you accept something like that, well, now you've got a problem. Now you've got this high value. You're putting this very high premium on life itself, right? Not on quality of life, not the reason why we value life. I mean, I put a very high premium on life. I don't put the highest premium on life, but I put a very high premium on life because I think life is worth living, right? And you know, here's a funny thing. I mean, I've been sort of criticized for saying this, but you know, we're all familiar with people who, you know, the angst-riddled teenager whose girlfriend or boyfriend dumps them, and then they take their lives because they think their lives are over and stuff like that, right? What's tragic about that is that we know that if they were just to suffer through the feeling of being dumped, they would eventually get over it. Okay, heartbreak is hard, but they would get over it, right? If they could just sort of weather the storm, and that's what's so tragic about people who kill themselves, who take this permanent solution to what we know is a temporary problem, but that they don't know is a temporary problem, right? You can be wrong about the reason for killing yourself, and I think you can be wrong about holding on to life, your own or someone else's. If you can be wrong about the reasons for killing yourself, and that your life is worth more than you think it is, you can also be wrong in thinking that your life is worth more than it is. You can be wrong in thinking that it's worth less than it is, and you can be wrong in thinking that it's worth more than it is. And I think that the situation you described, Warrior, and the situation that Hogtie is describing, as described, these are lives that aren't worth living, and the person themselves who is living the life could be mistaken about that. It is possible. Now, people are horrified at the prospect of how could he even suggest such a thing. They're worried about the slippery slope and where this could lead. But the way you don't sort of slide off the slippery slope is you think carefully and rigorously about what the value of life is. There's got to be a reason why we value life. If you just value life for the sake of valuing life, then we should all just be madly reproducing like crazy, and it doesn't matter, what the quality of anybody's life is, right? Well, no, we aren't just madly reproducing like crazy. I mean, we make choices.
I know some people that are.
Well, some people are, yeah.
Yeah.
But
we just got to bring more souls to the Lord. It doesn't matter if we can't feed them.
Right, yeah.
Because Jesus is coming back
like
anyway.
Well,
yeah.
The reason I posed the question isn't because, like, a lot of people think that, oh, well, in combat, you're afraid of getting shot. It wasn't getting shot. The problem was we were getting blown up by roadside bombs left and right.
Right.
And these guys weren't necessarily surviving. And me personally, nobody else is talking about this whole, hey, would you want somebody to snuff you out if you knew that you weren't going to survive? So me being the person I am, I made the conscious decision to get with one of my leaders and said, hey, and I took a round out of my mag. I handed it to him and I said, hey, if I can't come back, if I'm gonna die and I cannot be saved, if I'm blown up so bad that I'm not gonna be able to hold my kids, kiss my wife, and make some sort of life for myself and them, I said, you put this in my head. I said, I'd much rather be a corpse than be not the person I went over here as.
Do you recognize that there is a certain degree of nobility in that choice?
Yes.
I mean, I would think that that's an admirable thing to say. I've heard people say many times, even people like yourself who believe in God and have the supposed sanctity of life and all of this, they still have the example where, they're justifiable death penalty for certain crimes, and the circumstances when they want to have their life terminated if they're in a vegetative state or what have you. So I mean, in one way of looking at it is there's a hypocrisy in the belief system, but the other way is we all have a common understanding of what's right and wrong, and there's a lot of things that we will agree on. And I think that a lot of times the doctrine, or at least the what is the word that I'm looking for? Not the doctrine necessarily, but the
dogma.
The slogans and the jingoism or whatever that go along with that don't allow us to make moral decisions in some cases.
Yes.
Can I answer that, or can I respond to that
Sure.
battlefield question?
Yeah, go ahead, Christine.
Yeah.
I have some experience that I don't want to get into.
Yeah.
Where I was serving, and I attained a spinal cord injury, and at one point I didn't know what my quality of life was going to be, and I was pretty sure it was going to be one that I didn't want to live. And at the time, I did try to end things. Circumstances have changed, though. My quality of life has changed. I am so happy that I am not gone, and that I failed at suicide. It hasn't been a bed of roses. I also think it's kind of I guess I can see how a buddy, because it is a different system, a buddy system when you serve, where you can ask someone to do that. I don't think a civilian can look at a friend and say, will you do this for me, without being selfish. I think maybe only in that circumstance, that's not selfish to ask your commander or your battle buddy or whatever to do that. Like, at first I was like, oh, how could you put that on that guy? And then I realized, wait a second, we do that sort of thing, and we totally go out of our way as someone who served to be there even that far for our buddy. So it's not as selfish as I first, gut instinct was, and I apologize, even though I didn't say that right away as I wanted to, like, how dare you ask your officer to do that, blah, blah. I was going to get on you about it, but the more I think about it, I think that was completely within the norm, especially for that part of society. That's something acceptable. I went on a tangent there. I apologize.
No, tough questions will often elicit both answers. As you ponder
I
it a
think
while.
also Aaron Hogtie has mentioned in the chat that there was someone that was posting in Vaughan a question that he wanted to refer to.
Yeah, and I was pausing as I struggled to how do you pronounce her name here? Misty OJ, I don't know, girl. It starts with Misty, ends with girl. Anyway, she asks a question to Warrior: were you a Christian before you signed up to the military, and did you think all life was sacred at that time when you signed up? And if so, why did you, knowing that you can risk having to kill someone?
Yes, I was raised a Christian. I'm from generational military within my family. I think it has always been within me to serve my country and a cause and a purpose. Killing an enemy wasn't necessarily because they were rationally bad or good. It was more or less keeping my guys alive would be the only reason I would draw down on an enemy. It seems in today's society, it seems in Christianity, it's like we get this free pass, for, and I'm gonna caveat I'm gonna give a different perspective on it. We get this free pass for being, in the military and having to do this duty and all this, but how forgiven do you honestly think you are when you come home, seeing the things you saw, reliving those that are always behind your eyelids, and no matter how much forgiveness you ask for, the moving picture show in your head never goes away.
Warrior, can I just express as best I can my understanding as so far as I can. I have not been in that position. I firmly believe that neither Ozzy, Hogtie, or Aaron has been in that position. I think the only person that has probably shared similar experiences with you is Christine, and it would be impertinent and wrong of me to try and make any comments about that. So I'm going to invite Christine to speak to it if she wants to.
Sure. I always found it hypocritical when we would go to, before I asserted my rights as an atheist, we would celebrate, we have Remembrance Day on the November 11th here. And our unit or regiment that you belong to will usually go to the regimental church after a parade and a little bit of a ceremony and have a mass or whatever service the churches that your unit belongs to, because I got traded. I belong to a couple units. But it was always, God is in our side. You know, God wants our side to go over there and kill those other people. And I just immediately, before I got vocal about atheism, like I've always been an atheist. I was born an atheist, raised an atheist. I didn't get vocal until my mid-30s about it, though, until I saw that people were trying to infringe upon my rights to live my life the way I decided to live my life. And I would sit there and just go, like, does anyone else hear what this man is just saying about a God? That it's okay that we go and kill other people, and that for some reason God has chosen our side? Like, how do you determine that? And I think it goes to what you were saying, like, how much forgiveness can we expect? It's pretty arrogant to say, you know, just in general, oh, well, God was on our side, we were right, of course I'll be forgiving, kind of thing.
We were good and decent people at the wrong time. That's how I look at it.
Yeah.
I think God's a kid with an ant farm. I'm pretty lost when it comes to, like, people ask me all the time. They're like, "Well, what is God telling you?" I don't know. He doesn't talk to me.
And anyone who says that he does is a liar.
Matt
no
Dillahunty
offense.
corrected me on this very harshly. On stage, he corrected me on this very harshly when I said that God only talks to crazy people.
No, he doesn't. He's never spoken to me.
Well, Matt was quite irritated at that when he said that he fervently believed that God was talking to him.
Mm-hmm.
And
you can be mistaken.
I didn't know how to address that.
Well, you can just be mistaken about it, right? People mistake the source of the experiences they're having. You know, people believe that the Bible is a kind of almost a magic book, and that when you need guidance,
it is a magic book.
You can well, they see it as a magic book, that you can flip through it, and whatever passage your eyes light upon in that when you're meditating and contemplating on the will of God and what He wants for you. You look at those words, and then something comes to mind. You get a sort of a vibe, and people think, that's how God communicates. I mean, millions of people think this way. I thought this way. I used to use the Bible that way, as like some kind of Ouija board, right? Or they'll ask for a sign or something like that. They think that God communicates with them that way, not necessarily a voice in their head or anything like that, or through their dreams. That's a very common one as well. People do think that they are being communicated with by the Creator of the universe. They think they are in contact. They think that God is hearing them, and that things happen around them, experiences that they have, are in fact direct communications from the Creator of the universe, that they're beseeching for advice. And they're not crazy. I think that they're just mistaken. They're just in the grips of a flawed idea of how God would communicate. And the source of the feelings that they're getting and the ideas that are entering into their heads. I mean, nobody knows how the ideas that enter your head. I mean, I have a thought right now. I don't know how the sentence is going to end.
Could I just ask you about this? If I've recalled what you've just said, you were a Christian, and you thought that God was communicating with you.
Yeah, as a young man. Okay. I mean, I was a teenager, but yeah.
What changed your mind from that belief to the idea that was, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that was a crazy belief? Of course,
it wasn't crazy. It wasn't a crazy belief. It was a mistaken belief. I mean, in hindsight, it's
what I was asking was, you thought this originally, then you changed your mind, and you then subsequently considered this to be a crazy belief. So what what was a process that you went through from believing that you had a direct contact with God to believing that what you were hearing was nonsense?
What happened was I stopped believing in God. For completely independent reasons, I just stopped thinking that there was a God. And then in light of that, I had to reinterpret those experiences that I'd had and the memories that I had of things that I formerly thought were communications. In other words, I reinterpreted what I had been interpreting. I now understood that no, this was a lot of wishful thinking, a lot of the sort of looking for signs and thinking about dreams, and especially flipping through the Bible, and so listening to my heart and stuff like that. The inner still voice. A lot of this was just born of desperation. I really wanted to be communicated with. In moments of need, I felt that surely God is concerned about this. I mean, I'm so concerned about this, and I was assured, had always been assured, that God is listening and that He does give answers, right? And so I never expected an auditory hallucination or anything like that, or I never expected to hear a booming voice or see a burning bush or anything miraculous. I expected rather mundane experiences. I had been told that this is what it was going to be like. I had been told this by people who described their own communications, people in my family and friends. And so all that happened with me is I stopped believing that a God was a sort of a plausible idea for completely different reasons, having nothing to do with sort of failed prayers or failed communications or anything like that, and nothing to do with that. And then I had to think back on my experience and look at it honestly and say, well, really, what reason did I ever have for thinking that these were divine communications, except that I was desperate for such divine communications, and everyone around me told me this is exactly the kind of thing that God does when He wants to communicate with you. So I just reinterpreted it.
And to clarify, I mean, when DPR was asking the question, he said, like, so you had to go back and reinterpret these things you were hearing. I don't think you said that these were things that you heard.
No, I wasn't hearing. No.
Yeah, the
hearing
things that you were saying.
speaking.
Yeah, because I had similar experiences where I just felt that God was always leaving little clues for me to let me know that I was special and don't worry, I have a plan for you. And those are very valuable things to me. You had to kind of hunt for them sometimes and reinterpret. It'd be silly things like if I was playing a game of solitaire and I would be, oh boy, it'd really help if I could get a black 6 right now. And I got a black 6. That was a little pat on the shoulder from God to tell me that, like, you know what, I know things aren't going well with this other situation, whether it's a family thing or whatever. But just so you know, I'm here to make sure that the little things happen to make you happy, right? I never heard a voice that said, whatever. It was never that. So it wasn't an issue having to go back to reinterpret things that I had heard. It was to understand that sometimes when you don't see a black 6 on the board, the next card might be a black 6.
Yeah. And the ambiguity of it was almost seen as a sign that it was from God, because I had been assured that it takes discernment. Mm-hmm. And that you have to sort of grow in the Holy Spirit, and so if you're puzzled and unsure, that's okay, that's fine. That's exactly what you'd expect from a communication from God. Exactly. God isn't unambiguous, right?
Or if the black 6 doesn't show up, is it because you're just being tested? Then it becomes, well, it didn't show up because God had a purpose to, put me through a test. There was always just interchangeable answers to suit what you already wanted to believe, it seems, in a lot of cases.
Except
to me, anyway.
God never tested me by making a game of solitaire go bad. Right, the tests in my life, were things that weren't going well. I'm not going to tell a story of my childhood or whatever, but just like every other kid, let's just imagine there was something wrong in my life. Let's say my parents were fighting. That's not it, but we're not talking about. So anyway, so at that age, things are going, difficulty in your family or whatever. That was the test, because I would ask God for help with that. And I knew that God would answer, yes, I'm on it, or maybe later, And I always got it was either no or maybe later, right? And that was the test. So it was always the big things, the big bad things, where I was being tested. That's why those things were big and bad. The signs that I saw that were positive signs that God loved me were the little things, like getting a required beneficial card when I was playing solitaire. So that's how it's a very helpful belief set, right?
So what I've noticed is that the belief in God, the way that you interpret these little signs as you interpret them as signs, for the book God you believe in is exactly the same as if you were interpreting things that you're really only pretending is there?
Me personally,
Yes.
it's never putting trust in God down there. It was never putting trust in God to bring me home. It was putting trust in my fellow soldiers to have that general knowledge, that, you know, that muscle memory of, I take care of you, you take care of me, you watch my 6, I got your 6, I'm going to bring you home.
Yeah.
God wasn't in the equation. And then coming home and trying to put everything back together after that, and do I really believe in God now? I don't know what I believe. I don't know why a God would leave us stranded the way he does.
Yeah, for me, what's more important is not. And I'm sorry to cut. I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm going to have to jump off this show here for in just a moment. But I just wanted to say to you, for me, it doesn't matter what you believe. You know, I mean, if you're going to tell me what you believe, fine, but tell me why you believe it. You know, because that would be more important to me. And the big issue that I have with religious belief is the whole idea of faith, where you're going to believe it without reason and you're going to believe it against all reason and you refuse to be reasoned with. I mean, this is where I get into issues with believers. And of course, I'm not going to have that issue with you because you're not going to present that. You know, this is something that you have to work through on your own. And good luck to you on that. And I'm sorry they're going to have to bow out, everybody, but I do have to go.
Nighty night.
Not only you, me also, and I think, excuse me, judging by the messages that I'm getting in the chat, pretty much is everyone has to go, and also it's well beyond the 2 hours that we try and keep the show down to. But Warrior, can I thank you very much for coming along, and similarly express the sentiments that Aaron made to you. And if you would like to come back on a future show, we would love to have you on.
That'd be great. I appreciate that.
I'd like to extend an invitation to him personally if he wants to Skype me in the future, if he needs to talk about stuff.
There you go.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And as I say, if there are any links that people want me to include in the description of the video when it's it should be posted on YouTube now, just let me know. The best way of doing it is probably through what's the best way of doing it? Either Facebook or Twitter. Twitter's probably a good thing at the DPR Jones. But hopefully, no, actually, a much better one. Skype me at Magic Sandwich Show, and I'll include that in the links. Can I thank everyone that's been involved, everyone that's watched, everyone that will watch in the future if they haven't watched presently, everyone on the panel, everyone that's appeared as a guest. I as I always do, leave open the opportunity for final words for people. Anyone wants to go?
I'm loaded up, but I can be quick. Aaron, I really encourage you to look into this healthcare issue. Like I say, I tried to keep my observations short on it today, but it's just such a good discussion for you guys to have. It doesn't have to happen the way that the fear mongers think that it should happen. And other than that, I enjoyed the heck out of the show today. I think having Christine here, having Scott come in for a bit, Warrior's comments. I think we had some really good phases to the show, and just the people that joined us. Thank you very much. It's super awesome.
Yep. I have no final comments. Thank you for that. And I will probably visit this conversation with you later when it's just you and me.
Can do.
Okay.
Ditto to Warrior.
You and me. So I'm excluded from this conversation.
Well, we're talking about Canadian healthcare.
I wasn't. Anyway, Ozzy, anything you want to finish off with, Ozzy?
No, nothing to add. Just ditto what Hot said. I thought it was a great show. Thank you very much. It's always a privilege to be on the show. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Warrior, will you come back and join us in a future show? Maybe
Yeah,
you've
of course.
identified a topic that would be really interesting. It'd be lovely to have you back. Christine,
Yeah, it'd be great.
Christine, your experience of your virgin time on the Magic Sandwich Show.
Best time I ever lost my virginity, aside from the Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Enough now. Go on. No, sorry. Go on.
No, I had a great time. Thank you for the invite. I know I'm just sort of like a Jill six-pack, and I'm not on the level of the intelligence and experience of people in this room, so it was my privilege to be included today, and I thank you for the invitation. In my own defense, I think I heard this at one of the atheist conventions in the States. Never be the smartest person in the room, and you'll always learn something. So I think I achieved that. And see you later. Thanks.
All right.
Okay, we're done. Well, we're not quite done. I've got to press a couple of buttons. Okay, we're off board, and